Hello, and welcome everyone. My name is Maxim. I'm a customer success manager here at SEO Ranking, and this is my honor and pleasure to host this year's Digital Agency Growth Day. I'm tuning in from sunny Lisbon, Portugal, and I'd love to make sure that everything is set and you can hear and see me well. So you could just leave some comments in the chat box below. Maybe you could mention the location where you're tuning in from. It'd be just awesome. And let's just give it a moment so that we can see some comments and then we can get started. Hi from Poland, amazing. Okay, so let's keep on waiting for some more people to join us. And while you're typing in your comments, I think it's time for us to answer the big question. Why are we here today? Well, today we are mainly because AI is actually rewriting the playbooks we're also relying on. We've been working with the same SEO, organic, and paid traffic for years, but now everything is changing. And the big question today that the agency leaders ask themselves is not how do we grow anymore, but rather how do we scale without scaling our payroll, which becomes a bit of a problem. I see more and more comments. Hi, Hanan. Welcome from Israel. Welcome to Germany. Yes, we see so many people here. Amazing. Okay, so we have a very packed agenda for you guys today. Feel free to keep on typing those countries in the comments. I want to see as many countries as possible. Thank you. Amazing. And the agenda that we have prepared for you today is filled up with all kinds of speakers. We're going to have different kinds of sessions. Some are going to be more like a presentation. Others are be more like interviews. Now we're going to be hearing from Morty Oberstein and Mike Kornugan from SEO Ranking, Ari Nahmani from Kahina, Andrew Holland from GBH, Miruna Dragomir from Planable, and James Brockbank from Digital Loft. These guys are going to cover a variety of topics, starting from setting up new KPIs and what AI actually expects us to do. How do we increase our visibility? How do we convert that visibility into actual revenue? We're going to talk about content, about new benchmarks and what is considered to be a healthy benchmark in 2026, and many other topics. Now, before we actually dive into that, I would like to give you a short overview of the final goal that we're actually striving for with this event today. The final goal for us is for you to actually grab some practical implemented tomorrow workflows that you can actually take back to your agencies, back to your teams, and you can start working on as soon as possible. The job here is to automate the manual, to simplify the repeatable, and basically anything that is draining our time and creating this vacuum of unknown around AI. So before we actually get started with our first presentation, I would like to give our first presenters some time to prepare the kinks and iron out the kinks of their presentation and give you just a short overview of what SEO Ranking is about and why it is so beloved and trusted by so many partners all over the globe. Now, SEO Ranking provides you with an environment to leverage a variety of tools that cover anything starting from keyword research or competitive research to researching your AI visibility across different LLMs, to do technical checks and audits, and so much more. We also hope that you can rely on our AI-powered algorithms and those algorithms that provide you with unique data sets that you can use to devise new strategies. And finally, with SEO Ranking, you can manage multiple SEO projects. You can automate the reportings that we are so drained by, especially when you work with a multitude of clients. You can create and tailor user permissions so that only your clients see specifically what they're supposed to be seeing. Now, apart from that, what we're doing at SEO Ranking is that we are growing. And a very important thing I want you to remember about the platform is that SEO Ranking is not a tool. it's an experience and it's an environment that we are trying to embellish and enhance. And that experience actually includes a variety of products. Now, SEO ranking itself is the core product. It provides you with the hardcore, old school, organic and paid traffic research, site audits, backlink analysis, and anything we're so used to. But apart from that, we're also offering SEO Visible, which is a unique AI brand monitor that allows you to benchmark your clients' websites across different LLMs and see the perception that those AI search engines actually have for them. Apart from that, we also have Planable that has recently joined our team. Planable is a premium, high-quality social content planning and approval system. It doesn't only allow you to collaborate with your teammates, but also plan and schedule and work on the content way up ahead instead of just working with those spreadsheets. And finally, last but not least, we have our data API product. This is the newest of our products that we can offer. But the idea we have behind it is for you to actually tailor the workflow that you would like to have by using our APIs, creating custom applications, as well as simply using the SEO data that we've collected for you in the way that you see fit. Okay, so enough has been said about the product. I was just scheming the product in general, especially for those of you who are tuning in with SEO ranking for the first time. I think it's time we move on to our first presenters, and we're going to be hearing from Mike Kornugan and Morty Oberstein. Mike Kornugan is VP of Product at SEO Ranking, and Morty Oberstein is Head of Brand Marketing at SEO Ranking. They have a very interesting topic prepared for us, more specifically about the KPIs and what is expected to be a KPI, and how it is possible to start measuring performance when AI changes the click history. Hi, Mike. Hi, Morty. How are you?
Hey, Maxime. Nice joining you today, and thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm Mike.
Maxime. Hi, everybody.
Amazing, amazing. So before I give the floor to you guys, just a few quick words, just for some context about Mike and Morty. Morty Augustine is the lead of SEO Ranking's global brand and narrative, and he oversees the strategic or outreach and community engagement. While Mike is the to-go person of the product, he's the lead of the product development, and he is in charge of the whole life cycle. So guys, the floor is yours. Have fun.
All right. Thank you, Maxime. Such an honor to kick off this growth day today with Morty. We've been chatting in the, in the background a lot about this topic. So, Morty, why don't you do the honors?
Oh, I should do the honors? Do I have control of the deck?
All right. I mean, don't you?
I mean, Mike, I am second fiddle to marketing is second fiddle to product.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So the goal of today's discussion with Morty and myself is to talk about how you scale agency output with AI, but also how do we prove value to our clients nowadays? Because with AI search, with ChatGPT, AI overviews, and everything else taking over the search volumes, it's getting harder and harder to prove to customers like why and how you have to invest there.
I feel like everyone in this conversation has, felt this pain of where we're in a different world, but where's the value? How do I communicate that value to my client?
Yeah, it's true. So let's dive right in. Okay, this is a big slide, right? We've, Morty?
No, go ahead. No, sorry. I think I'm on a delay, so I apologize.
Yeah, we wanted to kick it off with a more fundamental question of like, what does it really mean to be even visible in 2026? And yeah, we've talked with many prospects and clients and experts in the industry, and it seems like there are two different approaches that you can take right now, and both of them can be quite successful, where one is performance focused and another one is brand focused. Morty, do you want to start talking about the brand first?
Sure. It's interesting because the LLMs are being visible in the LLM era. It's a new world, I think, for us. On the performance side, so much of the conversation has moved to how do you position yourself? Because LLMs are not just a performance channel, which we'll get more into obviously later. Like there's a lack of traffic coming from them. There's a lack of opportunities for clicks. And it makes the output that you're seeing when you run a prompt, or when your customers run a prompt, or your clients run a prompt, a little bit more holistic, and the positioning that you're going to take becomes way more important. So performance now kind of overlaps with brand in a totally different way, at least on the digital side.
Yeah, 100%. And with performance, probably all of you already know that, the traffic is kind of not there. So most of us we have to rely on other signals that are more like correlation like, but whenever you dig deeper, you really start seeing the impact on traffic quality and how many good leads you start getting, or how many more good leads you start getting with your branded and direct traffic as you gain in AI visibility. So, but I guess before we dive deeper into any of this, let's maybe talk about what it used to be.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days where things were simple, where the only thing where everybody knows what the search volumes are. You gotta be in your top 3. You know what the click-through rates are, and you get your traffic. You can understand where they're coming from, what the good sources are, and you can optimize for them. Oof.
Oh, it's funny because it reminds me of back in the day. Was it 8 years ago already? Something like that. I'm getting old. Google wrote a post. The funnel is messy, and fast forward to 2026, and the funnel got messier. Hold my beer.
Yeah. I remember how different people at different conferences were referring to this as like, oh yeah, that people are searching, then you see the people coming in to make your purchases, but then there's this messy middle that, as you just said, gets messier and messier with every year, and with AI like never before. So yeah, let's talk a bit about why it's so complicated right now. I mean, we've kind of mentioned that the traffic from AI is not really there, right? And for a lot of very good reasons. For one and big one that you see in the top left is that all of them, both Google and OpenAI, Claude, take anything, they're trying to build their solutions as walled gardens so that you stay in your ecosystem, so that you, as a user, as someone who makes their searches, who prompts the AI, you stay within the ecosystem, both by maybe not focusing on you as much on sources so you don't click away, or if they do give you sources, in Google's case, they would lead you to another place in their ecosystem. Or with OpenAI, partnering with what was it? The famous e-commerce provider, right? So that you can make the purchases right there.
Oh, Shopify, yeah.
Yeah, the Shopify. Sorry, pardon me, blanking out here. Yeah.
It's amazing. First off, Google's always kind of been a walled garden. That was, I remember when, if for those of you who've been around the SEO industry for a while, when answer boxes first came on the scene. So you would Google what's the weather in New York City, and you wouldn't have to go to the weatherchannel.com. That's a tongue twister. Google just gives you the answer box. It's now sunny in New York City. I mean, you could have looked out your window to gotten the same answer, but fine. So Google's kind of always been a walled garden to a certain extent, but now like we just ran a study on this, and that's the data you're looking at here. Is Google is linking to itself way more often than it used to. And hat tip to Will Reynolds, who was asking about this on I think it might have been on LinkedIn or X. Hey, I'm noticing that Google is linking to itself in its citations more often, and it turns out the data is it is, and Google's putting out the narrative like citations will give you traffic. But even if they did, like on the one hand, they don't. Everyone's kind of seeing their traffic down. But even if they did, the citations are to themselves. So where's that traffic coming from? And either way you slice it.
Yeah. So that actually leads us straight away to the next slide, where even when you do know that people would click on that link, oftentimes there's no attribution. But then more often than not, the way AI systems provide the answer is they talk about the brands and the products, which means that there's no click happening that leads to your website directly. And typically somewhere between, there's going to be a search for the product, or they're going to type in your website directly. And then, yeah, Search Console is not much help either here. They're actually doing their best to disguise the AI traffic in the web traffic.
Yeah, they won't offer the data on. So there's been such a, I guess, critique of their development on the data side. But it's amazing to me because that loss of attribution has been so complicated and it's been so dizzying for folks to deal with. And it's true, there's no metric. It's almost like, in the SEO world, correlation doesn't equal causation. But now that's kind of all we're left with to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's true. And I see Anthony in the comments is asking, with AAOs answering, let me actually show this. Whoops. With AAOs answering more queries directly on the SERP, what specific metrics are you using to prove brand influence? I'm not actually sure if we want to take this right now, because I think we have a slide later on that kind of lays this down, but maybe we can, start. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot about this, and that's really the question. Like, what are you actually? You're looking at brand lift, and that's always been a complicated thing to look at and measure. And now it's even more complicated because we're so used to having that attribution, and it's really a different way of thinking and a different mindset, and it's an adjustment.
Yeah. But to make it short, in reality, right now, there's no clear metric that you can rely on for the influence. Right now, what we're doing is we're relying on correlations for the branded and direct traffic quality, primarily for the performance channels, as well as referral traffic, which in some cases can be quite significant. But then there's this other part of the story where a lot of teams are being quite successful, but not from the performance side. And that is the perception. Morty, probably there's nobody,
I mean,
but you can talk about this better.
That's like, we're a great combo, right? Product and brand, the SEO and the performance and the brand. And that's always been on the search side. And by the way, if you're looking at the SEO industry right now, and it's just a good point of reference where people are arguing, is it GEO, is it SEO? The camp that's been on, it's SEO, people have been focused on, I'll bring up an old acronym, EAT or EAT, that perception of authority, which we'll probably get into more about topics soon, has always been a part of the SEO question. But now it's really in focus, because when you go to an LLM and you type in, which is better, Gatorade or vitamin water, the LLM has an opinion about that. And you have to worry about not just, and this is what I wanted to mention before, I mean, tip my tongue, LLMs are not built to give you traffic. They're not designed to give you traffic. They don't want, ChatGPT doesn't even offer you citations half the time till like the fourth prompt in.
Yeah, funnily enough, when we, to add to this, when we looked deeper into the citation, the sources that are using, in fact, they're typically showing just a few sources. While in reality, if you look into the Dev Console and see what the number of sources that are actually using, it's typically much larger. It can be up to 10, 15 sources, similar to AI overviews. It's just that just select few are actually being highlighted.
And that's sort of the problem, is that there's an output and there's clearly an opinion about whether or not your brand either aligns or doesn't align that your audience is taking in. And sometimes you have an idea of your positioning, and that's really what happens with all of this, that your positioning becomes way more of a performance point and way more in focus for performance marketers. And you might see yourself a certain way, and we'll get into some examples of this, but the LLMs might not see you that way, which means that your audience might not see you that way.
Yeah, and that's why I've just been at a conference at SMX where I've been talking with a few teams with a few representatives of bigger brands where brand teams were actually more interested in AI search than performance teams due to the reasons that we've just discussed. Yeah, where they just want to make sure that, hey, next to all these competitor brands, we do come up, and that we come up in the right light, where the sources actually matter more. The trusted sources actually matter more in terms of how AI talks about you, as opposed to your own website.
Yeah,
and yeah,
that's where, like, folks, like, this is where you can help your clients, because what we do on the SEO side is so impactful for how the web understands us. LLMs are just a proxy for how the web understands you. Sometimes great, sometimes not great. Usually pretty good, actually. And what you're looking at here is Garmin, and I'm dating myself with this, but if you're of a certain age, you might remember Garmin from plugging in a device into your car before cell phones did anything but text message and call people. That was Waze. This is Waze of the past, and Garmin was making these devices, and there's so much brand equity and so much content built up around navigation that now that Garmin has kind of pivoted away from navigation into fitness with their watches, the web still understands them, or LLMs, because of the web, still understands them from too much of a navigation point of view. So when you start looking for Garmin on their watches, navigation, which is a minor, I don't know, a minor, but a selling point, but not the major selling point of this device, comes way more into focus than the other brands because of the legacy content that exists. And that's where you can help from a digital PR point of view, from an SEO, from the sheer volume of content point of view, really help your clients.
Yeah. And this may be an exaggerated example. Maybe not too many brands go through this exactly. But what you might see is that, I don't know, if you're helping a company who's in SaaS, because the sources are talking about it from, a year ago, they'd be talking about a totally different feature set or about a very different audience that it's a match for. And that's really what you want to watch out for.
Yeah, and that's like where the pivot comes in, right? When you're trying to pivot, that's where you see real problems coming in. So let's say you're an electronics company and now you're pivoting. Imagine I always use Sony as an example. Imagine you're Sony and you stop making TVs and electronics and you just went into their movie business. That's all they had left. It barely registered with me that Sony makes movies. I know because of Marvel. But they would have to really pivot, and there would be a whole sentiment shift and a whole web understanding shift that would have to happen here if, for example, they wanted to make that pivot.
Yeah. And I mean, even for us, right now we're going through a similar challenge.
Same.
And it's definitely, it's so hard. Like you have to understand, like, what are the sources that AI picks for to define like who this brand is, and like in this categories, who do they go to, and then work with those, with the news outlets across on social to make sure that that people also talk about you now as a different entity compared to what they used to years ago, or even just months ago sometimes.
Yeah, shout out to all the digital PR people, because this is right up their wheelhouse.
Yeah, and talking about the attribution problem, it's really hard not to bring up some of the bigger players in the AI search market. Like Profound is now they're on the forefront here, right? They've released some of the awesome features really fast. But even them having these very strong data science team, having clickstream data, still they got roasted online so hard for their search volume estimations for prompts. And now you can see how they're raising money to actually invest elsewhere, because this problem right now is not really as attainable. We gotta wait for the market makers to provide the data, for Google, for OpenAI to release their own let's say keyword planner tools for AI, and then we'll be able to talk more about the attribution and talk about AI search as a more transparent performance channel.
Yeah, and not even like I'll leave like the teasing of like our product to you later about this, but it's a really hard problem, and it's so I don't know, traditional, or just it's just how it goes in the industry for a long time, that the way we develop product for these kind of things is very linear. But now we're not dealing with a very linear situation. So, and this has nothing to do with whatever platform we're talking about. It's really just across the board. Because the attribution is such a problem, and because LLMs are so difficult in terms that they overlap between brand and performance, that the typical way of thinking about a product solution on this just doesn't line up, and it becomes problematic. Again, it goes back to that first question you asked, Mike. Where's the value in what I'm tracking and monitoring?
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, everybody right now, we can tell how market is quickly moving to agentic e-commerce, where agents are buying for you, where where it's a single person that does a job of 10, and therefore they rely on agents to actually do the discovery for them and search the web for whatever is necessary. And yeah, look at this comment on the previous topic. How deep legacy content is only an asset if it serves as a historical record or is meticulously maintained. Otherwise, isn't it just data?
Digital hoarding. I'm going to steal that. Digital hoarding. That is such a great point.
Yeah.
So, but we're talking about like the data here. Like it's amazing. So they're back to your point from before. We're waiting for the data providers, meaning the actual platforms themselves. And it's interesting because I know that I think it was Glenn Gabe was covering this on SERoundtable.com that ChatGPT announced some of their ad metrics for their platform, but Google still has nothing. Being announced, surprisingly and unsurprisingly, and it's weird. Bing kind of jumped in and was able to steal that momentum a little bit. So in Webmaster Tools, you do have reporting on citations. You don't have any reporting on mentions, but the cool part is the grounding part. I'll let Mike talk about that.
But before we even talk about that, I just really want to say talk about why Google may not be doing this thing. I mean, you've probably, since you're here, you probably heard about the AA Max, right? Have you guys talked about this already while I was out?
No.
And I have a hypothesis that it's very possible that what they're trying to do, and I mean, remember how initially it was all about you just pay for impressions, for thousands of impressions, then you pay for clicks, then you pay for conversions. Now with AA Max, they're like, just pay us for business results, and that's it. So probably there's a good chance, and I hope it's not true, there's a good chance they may not be releasing anything, and it's just going to be a completely black box solution in the end.
It's a shame, really. Good chance. Well, it's a shame also because there's an opportunity for them to drop. But I think what they're also worried about on that point is what's the narrative on the web, because they don't want to show the lack of traffic. I think that's problematic from a narrative point of view.
I'm pretty sure it is. It is. Yeah. And speaking of the grounding queries and citation counts, right? There's nothing like you can still see what kind of searches the AI makes, right? And that's what you can work with. That's why the query fan out is so important. And right now it's quite possible to extract what the queries are for ChatGPT and for Perplexity. For Google, it's a bit more complicated, but it's possible to approximate based if you have huge data sets like we do, for example. So you can still work with keywords to make sure that whenever an agent does a search to come up with a response, you still come up at the top. And back to the point that Reimagined Digital was making about the digital hoarding and maintaining content, like more often than not, AI picks the freshest piece of content. So that's why it's more important than ever nowadays.
Yeah, and I want to just like before we flip slides, we didn't talk about the Search Console. They're adding branded. They added was it last week? My sense of time is all warped. It was last week. They added the brand filter, so you can see branded queries, and they're trying to add social metrics into Search Console. I know that they said that it's delayed, but basically it's a pull-in from web behavior, looking at how people are interacting on social inside of your Search Console. So the reality, it's right there on the slide, like the new reality is like multi-source attribution. That's what Search Console is literally doing. So when we're talking about this, we're not talking about this in a vacuum. That's what Google is trying to do inside of Search Console.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to add. Actually, there's an interesting question from Raymond. I'm not sure if you guys have addressed it. The quantifying of brand authority within AI training models.
Yeah, we spoke for a quick second. No, I said we would address it soon. Okay. So no,
okay, then. Sounds good. Well, you want to address it later?
No, we can do it now. Yeah, let's do it now. So like, is there a way to quantify brand authority? It's a great question. And we'll talk about it more soon. I think it's really a lot. Again, it goes back to how do you measure brand lift? And measuring that is not direct. And that goes back to Mike, you were saying before about the attribution, impression, click, revenue. Measuring brand lift is complicated. and you're trying to measure, you're trying to look at what's happening directionally. So you're looking at branded search, you're looking at social media followers, you're looking at also direct traffic and which page is it going to indirectly. Imagine your Netflix, for example. You will look at how many people are Googling us by our name, how much direct traffic are we getting? I know direct has been sort of like a black box for anything that's not attributable. But if you're Netflix, you're looking at that, like everyone does go to netflix.com. So that's a real metric for you. And I know that's a hyperbolic sort of example, but people are looking at, and you should be looking at, is there a correlation? And you have to, by the way, unpack paid, because a lot of times you're running paid, it'll impact direct also because people see you but if you can siphon out the paid and you can see, is there more direct around a certain product and that aligns to the LLM visibility or the LLM mentions, that's a great way to measure brand lift.
Yeah. And to talk about the metrics, like what we're doing right now is we just look at both your mentions in the prompt cluster and your citation share, and we multiply the two, and that's how you get essentially a number from 0 to 100 of what is your relative weight. And the citation share is not just how many times your website is cited, but how many sources also mention your brand. That's essentially, this is the share. This is kind of the 0 to 1 metric, or measured in percentage, that kind of describes your brand authority with AI in your particular cluster. Similar to like a page trust, but for a cluster, you'd have your like AI authority, brand authority with AI.
Which we'll get into a lot, I think.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
Oh man, search volume. Wow.
Yeah, so we've kind of touched this a bit, right? How we're so used to having this really clear attribution, and with prompts and AI search, it's really much harder. I don't know if you've noticed yourself how you've changed how you search. I certainly did. Now I no longer put in like 2 words, 2-word queries. Actually, typically, even with Google, I go for like full blown question with all the context and details. And yeah, because of that, it's really hard to work with individual prompts as the way we used to work with keywords. And instead, it actually makes sense to approach same keywords as like groups of prompts, or the way it's written on the slide is natural language topics.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And I think that, but if you're talking about scaling, I think one of the things that helps with this, first of all, it's a real mindset shift from keywords to prompts, because what you're really looking at is, I'll just be like very blunt with you. You can tell within a few prompts versus, let's say you needed there's so many variations with the keywords and you're trying to grab traffic. With a prompt, I can directly understand for a topic, how does the LLM understand me? And how am I represented in the LLM? So the visibility monitoring and the visibility question and how you go about monitoring that is a completely different construct than it was keywords, where you had volumes to particular keywords. And it really mattered in some cases which keyword you were showing up with variation. It's a little bit of a different ball game. And that, by the way, can help you scale much easier when you make that shift.
100%. I think for the sake of time, we can just move on from this, because we kind of keep talking about the similar thing, and just dive a bit deeper, right? The way you can work with this is, Marge, would you like to talk about this, since you've just...
So there's a lot of different, there's a strategic, we're calling it a strategic prompt filter. And what you're trying to do is figure out, okay, you start off tracking one thing, and as you start realizing what's happening in the LLM, you can refine that. So for example, just one of the ways, you're starting off with 3+ words, a little bit of a long tail kind of prompt, like if you think of like a long tail kind of keyword. And as you go through and see like how the performance is happening and validating that, then you can sort of refine how you're going about the tracking process. So it's really more of a process than it was, let's say, with keywords. You did your research, you know what you're tracking. You really want to start refining how you focus on this thing.
Yeah, it's like, see, there's this question of like, how do we find the right must-win prompts? Yeah. That's essentially the way you go with. You still start right now. Keywords are still your best bet of where to start, or some solutions like ours, we offer topics for which to look into. So you start with where the money is with the paid keywords. From those, you create the prompts. then you still have to check what kind of brands they return. If the brands are of a different league compared to yours, it's not what you want to compete in. You want to go more narrow, right? More specific.
Yeah.
Like, I think we'll talk about this in a moment, but it's essentially like if we talk about mortgages, for example, like I've been talking with a friend of mine who's working at a great startup in the space. And yeah, so sometimes people will be looking like, hey, what's the best mortgage like in this area, right? So this is going to be a very generic prompt. You'll get very influential brands, let's put it this way, at the top of the response. But then if you go further, like, hey, so what is the best deal? How much house I can buy with a specific salary? And then if I work here, that's when you'll start getting brands that are more specific, that are more niche, that are probably your direct competitors, and these are the prompts that you'll actually be working with. So yeah, as Morty was saying, it's a more iterative process now.
Yeah, like you're casting a wide net, kind of like you were with search, where you're casting a wide net. But as you see like where you're actually positioned to succeed, that's where you have a fighting chance. Literally, great time to switch the slide.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how you find the right must-win prompts. You now. I've just had a few great conversations with an awesome startup. They're themselves working on an agentic tool, but funnily enough, maybe not so funnily, they're great. Their first acquisition channel was AI search, ChatGPT, and Gemini in AI mode. That's their biggest acquisition channel, actually. And only now they're starting to work in SEO. And the way they approach their prompts they were incredibly specific. They know who their potential customers are, and they're like, okay, so if I'm this and that in this industry, and I'm looking to solve this kind of problem, and they're very specific, it's like essentially it's a whole paragraph of text. That's the prompt. They were able to optimize for these prompts, and they find customers who are looking for these solutions every day and every week now. Just through that.
And I'll give you like another an example. Like one I've always been like kind of using is, let's say you're on a Samsung versus TCL. So TCL offers more a budget option. Let's say like Samsung's a little more higher end, or Sony, which I think bought out part of TCL. But TCL is offering TVs, and they're positioning themselves as a budget-friendly option. So if you're looking for prompts, I understand on the discovery side with keywords, you might go after any TV keyword. But because the LLM is understanding your brand a certain way, so you're refining that and understanding, okay, this is our niche, and let's start here. And then you're refining again from there to seeing who are we competing with? Are we able to compete with them on that slot? And if for the case of TCL, like where are we known from the across the web, from our own content, our digital marketing efforts, our brand efforts, our PR efforts? And then where can we capitalize on that? What prompts can we actually outperform a bigger brand like Samsung, because we have that brand equity around that particular niche identity?
Yeah, exactly. And then once you establish that, you still want to understand what is the sentiment around your brand, and what are the factual mistakes and stuff like that is happening.
Yeah, and that's where you'll realize what's happening. I don't know why we always track like branded keywords, track branded prompts. Literally track branded prompts as a separate category like you're seeing here, because then you can understand how the LLM is understanding it, who is competing with you on the branded prompt. Like if you're Sony in this case, is Samsung your main competitor? And which vertical is it with? So you really want to see, if you're tracking prompts, you do want to understand how the LLM is relating to the brand. Throw in branded prompts, and then see where you have gaps in your narrative and where you don't have gaps, and who's coming after you.
Yeah, well said. Cannot add much. I guess back to, I think there were a few comments about the knowledge trees, right, and the nodes around this. And yeah, we think about this like topic authority and like the tree of topics, right, which is just a similar term, but probably easier to understand in general.
Yeah, and this is where I think you're developing on the product side, where we're looking at this from a little more of a topical point of view than as a particular like quote unquote keyword point of view or prompt point of view.
Yeah, and the way we approach like the next iteration of research tools is our goal is to help you understand what are the topics, what are the archetypes and groups of prompts where you and your competitors actually come up, what is your visibility, and what are the sources there. Because for every topic and for every niche, unsurprisingly, probably, the list of sources is going to be different. And therefore, the list of brands presented is also often going to be different. And your visibility actually might vary depending on the topic, even though you might think that, why would it?
Yeah. It's definitely a top, again, because you don't have to go about it the same way as a keyword. It's really how are you coming across the web from a topic point of view, and where can you capitalize on that?
100%. Yeah, and that's where the technical tooling comes in.
Oh man, the Search Console thing is so interesting. I'll let you talk about it, but I find it like so interesting. They really integrated an AI interface into Search Console, and that can really help you. First off, it does have caveats to it, and I'll let Mike talk about it more, but you can really start seeing and pulling out data in a different way, in a much simpler kind of way.
Yeah, basically Google, as many others, are introducing their own chats now, Gemini powered, into their own tools, right? The analytics has surfaced that for some time now. Now Search Console brings similar experience where you could just ask questions in natural language and get amazing results really quickly. You can ask something like, hey, can you compare mobile traffic from the US this month versus last? Or like, find me the patterns that are unusual. And it's actually, surprisingly, it will be able to find the patterns that you would spend probably hours, sifting through different charts and different filters, which is amazing. Although from the product perspective, I'll just add my 5 cents here. As we've been discussing that, across different tools, it feels a bit like a dead end. And I wonder what you guys think here in the chat. If you drop a comment, I'm really interested in this, because I myself and most professionals that I know, we would use either Claude, which is now the primary tool here at SEO Ranking, or ChatGPT, and then we would connect all the rest of the tools through MCP, or would pull all the data into something like Looker, BigQuery, essentially, or any other data solution, and then be able to do anything across multiple tools. Because, well, asking questions like this across a single channel is often there's often just not enough context to make the right decision, although this is still incredibly valuable. So I wonder what you guys think.
I agree, but I don't want to get harp on it too much.
All right, feel free to drop your comments later as we keep moving forward.
Yeah, which means, by the way, just quickly on the Search Console side, you don't have to use regex filters anymore the same way. So it just makes pulling the data easier.
Yes, you still can. You can filter. You can use this filter to find the prompts. And yeah, you'll find quite a few of them that are much longer, right, than your regular keywords. And this could be your starting point to understand where you actually come up, even before you start spinning with any kind of solution, because you already have your Search Console data.
Yeah, the long tail thing is huge.
And now we're finally coming to the KPI set and what you want to track now. Marty, would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, so back in the day, you were really looking at it from a very linear point of view. I think you're hearing a lot more conversation now about the silo, the team silo, or the company silo. I know I'll give you just a shout out to whoever, if you're watching this or was talking to you yesterday about this, manages a big SEO team. They're trying to pull social in underneath their wings because they realize how large of an influence, from a visibility point of view, having social is under the SEO side of things. And this is a conversation that's not new on the SEO side. We've always talked about how distribution channels can help you influence mentions and links. But now when you're trying to measure everything, what you're kind of looking to do is correlate. If we're seeing an increase in LLM mentions, where else do we see a correlation that aligns? Do we see better traffic? Do we see more traffic? Do we see different kinds of traffic? Do we see correlations on social now? Do we see more engagement on social now? Because it's very possible, by the way, that you see something in an LLM, you then Google that thing. And if you talk about the knowledge graphs, which we're talking about in the comments, in the knowledge graph are social profiles, which might be the first click that you do in order to validate what you're seeing in the LLM. So all the channels come together in order to correlate what's happening across the board. And this goes into topic authority, which I'll let Mike talk a little bit about.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on that, right? So the way we think right now about the KPIs you talk about is, yes, there's topical authority. What we've talked about, how many of the relevant groups of prompts in the topics you care about actually mention you, and the sources that they use also mention you. This could be your own sources or third parties. This is something that you're essentially tracking now. And then, yeah, Morty has already said that in terms of performance, you would still, at least in the next 3 to 6 months, it seems like we'll be relying on correlations in how AI visibility impacts the quality of your direct and branded traffic. And
what do they do next?
Exactly. The clicks are not going to be there. So what you'll be able to see is like, hey, how many customers actually did a follow-up action? And that's something that we'll probably see coming soon. And yeah, we're going to be relying a lot on combining a lot of data pieces from the market makers, that once they actually roll out more data points for all of us to use. Because right now, pretty much all of us are in the dark. And the two things that we can rely on is topical authority, us standing next to the brands that we care about, that we are represented properly, and then seeing the impact in correlations. These are the two things.
Yeah, which I just like, to quickly like run through. I think it's for the sake of time, just like the most important part of that, and just to really just give like a clear example of that. If you really want to identify like where the gaps are, and then see what's happening across as you work to fill those gaps, what's happening across the ecosystem. So for example, let's just say you see more branded mentions around a certain topic show up because you're tracking that. What happened next? Do you have more direct traffic to landing pages about that topic? Are you getting more branded searches about that topic? Are you seeing more engagement on social about that topic? If you can correlate any of those two things together, let's say, for example, you're seeing we have more mentions about a certain product line. We now have more social engagement around that product line. Right? So there's a correlation there. So people are moving over to social and they're really engaged on that content, and they're seemingly influenced by what the LLM outputted. Or if they're going directly to those LPs, then they're looking for us specifically around that, or moving through the website specifically around that, because now I can see the correlation between that product line and the LLM. This is really what you're trying to do after you identify where your gaps are.
Yeah, I'd say that, I mean, this slide also reiterates a bit on what we talked about, how you approach the prompt selection. You can quickly find the long tails, the prompt impressions in Search Console, right? You can go from that. You can pick your topics and decrease the scope from that. You can also use our solution, right, to find which brands actually come up for the prompts that you care about. And you don't necessarily have to use a tool yourself. You can rely on our MCP. You can rely on our APIs. It's very easy right now. You can just ask Claude or ChatGPT to build an app for you and build it into whatever interface you care about, and group and cluster the sources just the way you want. So that's what I do tomorrow or even later today.
Yeah. And that Bing thing, the step number 2, by the way, like the exporting the grounding queries, I think we haven't talked like enough about that. That is a really great way to see how Copilot understands you, which you can replicate and use as a baseline across the board.
Yeah. And that pretty much concludes what we wanted to talk about. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was helpful. Please leave your comments. We're here to answer any of your questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Morty. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been very insightful. I, as a person who constantly works with digital agencies across the globe, one thing that actually struck me in your conversation there is like the search volume for prompts as a database. This is something I've been hearing a lot from my clients. So I wish for the day when I wake up and that database is actually public and we can provide them with some search volume.
Well, Yeah, it's definitely a hard problem. Even with clickstream data available with the biggest players, the estimations are so far from perfect that you can use them as relative numbers at best.
Yeah,
Relative
absolutely.
to each other.
Too relative.
Yeah.
That's true. Right. So we do have a few more minutes for some Q&A. If anyone has, missed the opportunity to type in their question quickly, you have this opportunity right now. If not, then Morty, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you here today. And thank you so much for the insight. Let's connect later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, guys, in case you have missed the opportunity to ask Morty or Mike a question directly, feel free to leave the comment right there in the chat box. We'll make sure to deliver that question to them. And if not, you can always contact us at support@sranking.com. Our amazing support team will do their best to have the question answered as soon as possible. So following through, we have our next presentation, and while our presenter is preparing, I do have a quick filler word about on the same topic that basically Morty and Mike have been shedding some light on for us. Basically, as Visible, as mentioned previously, this is one of our unique products, and it's a great monitor that allows you to, scheme and benchmark the visibility of a website across different LLMs. Now, with the core SEO ranking functionality, again, you get the organic, regular data that is still, thankfully, essential for us to function as an SEO society. But with SEO Visible, it's something different. You can actually look into the sentiment, the citations, and the sources where those AI answers and prompts are generated. And based on that, you can actually start building up your own strategy. Okay, so following through, we have another presentation. This time we have Ari Nahmani, CEO at Kahina. He's going to talk about how agencies sustain and grow in an automated world and how to still remain human. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Amazing, amazing. I'm really grateful for you to, have found the time to join us today. I know that situation there is a bit difficult because you're currently in a shelter. Is that right?
That's right. Being based in the Middle East, at the moment things are a little bit dynamic. I know many of you SEO ranking are aware of the situation and can sympathize sometimes. But yeah, so at the moment I'm in a shelter. I've got another studio set up over there, but Murphy's Law, we had a siren just a moment ago, so I'm in the shelter. All good. I got my laptop set up, ready to go.
Amazing. Then I'm passing on the mic to you and have fun with the presentation.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Really excited to present today. Thanks to SE Ranking for having me. And let's dive in. So let's go over what I'll be speaking about today. Always nice to start with an agenda. So first, we'll be covering a bit about me and my agency, Kahina. Next, I'll set the scene with an intro. And then we'll go into how we as agencies can leverage AI and automation with real practical use cases, which will then open up our time, right, to lean into more being human, the key for retention and growth. And I hope to leave enough time here for some good Q&A. So why don't we dive in? Just a bit about me. My name is Ari Nahmani, CEO and founder of Kahina. I've been in digital marketing, search marketing for 20 years this spring, which is kind of crazy. Started Kahina 15 years ago, singularly focused on SEO and PPC. We're a team of 20 some odd amazing people located here in Israel, the UK, and the US. And we've grown sustainably with great opportunities to work with both SMBs and enterprises. You guys are all in agencies. Obviously, I've cherry picked some of the bigger logos here below. Come on, we all do it. But yeah, I've had awesome partners over the years and been exposed to a lot of great teams and brands. So I'll apologize in advance for my Daft Punk inspired theme here. can I say, is sort of a child of the 90s. And, staying human is sort of the theme. So went with it. So let's jump into it. So the topic of leveraging AI as digital marketers and as information workers in general has sort of like reached a fever pitch, right? It's nonstop. It's everywhere. I'm constantly bombarded on LinkedIn and from colleagues with links to seemingly everyone else doing incredibly advanced automation with agents and integrations and MCPs and CLIs. It makes me feel like we're becoming irrelevant as humans and that we're perpetually behind the curve. And even if we ignore a lot of the hype in our feeds, the truth of the matter is, in many ways, the way we have worked until today is getting replaced before our eyes. So you won't necessarily be replaced by AI itself yet, but you might get replaced by agencies or in-house contacts who leverage AI and automation more effectively than you are. And there is sort of a serious split, sort of a bifurcation happening among all information workers. I'm sure many of you have experienced this. Those that are testing and utilizing various forms of AI automation daily, and those who are begrudgingly sort of sticking to an old way of working and are sort of AI skeptics. So this split feels like it's accelerating and will become extremely apparent, I think, in the next 6, 12, 18 months. And sort of given AI's ability to commoditize our specialty skills in this industry, our deliverables, know-how, even our years of experience, we're not that special anymore, right? So when your in-house contact can do keyword research and build a content plan and write up optimized content, or on the paid side, build a media plan and set up and manage campaigns with the same ROAS and ROI targets that you have and that you can, with a predefined team of agentic workers or who don't complain about scope creep or limited resources, it begs the question, what value do you have as an agency or a consultancy? And so that's what I hope to lay out today is, how can we get ahead of our clients and accelerate our use of AI and automation in our field so that we can focus on being human and retain and grow our client base and agencies? So let's first dive into AI and automation. So first off, it's really important to try and choose and focus an AI ecosystem at your agency. The idea is standardization, best practices, and of course, data privacy. Agency staff are already probably tinkering and likely uploading sensitive information to various systems at your companies, right? So with various models and various settings configured. So my recommendation is, if you're on Google Workspace as an agency, lean into pro Gemini accounts that you're already paying for, right? Otherwise, it's probably good to try or experiment with a paid pro account, a paid pro Claude account. ChatGPT is great, and I use a paid account personally still, but as an agency, we've moved off of it. And so the bottom line is, like, evaluate what works best for you and stick with a primary ecosystem with standard operating procedures defined. We at Kahina use Gemini for client data, analysis, file systems, information sharing, right? Brainstorming. And we also use Claude for specific use cases and R&D and experimentation. But ultimately, you have to choose, or you should choose, a primary ecosystem and stick with it. And then in the near future, I think, the next step will be building and customizing agents. And it will become a sort of key differentiator between different agencies. Agencies should already be building skills, right? I'm putting skills in quotes, skill files and instruction sets that go beyond just saved, shared prompts across the agency. So you can do this right now with Claude skills and build specific client projects that may have more nuance, but that still leverage your agency's skills system wide. And Gemini has something similar with gems that are shareable across the agency. And so while agents exist, sort of automated agents, I wouldn't recommend going full agentic just yet. The space is really dynamic, somewhat unpredictable. But others, like at your client's office, might easily install pre-trained SEO and PPC agents like this one that you've got in the screenshot here. And technically adept people at your client's company may already be playing with these. So I think the way to stay ahead of this is to define and build these skills as instruction sets now that will highlight your experience and your style and your know-how as an agency. And that will allow you to easily illustrate why the off-the-shelf agents that are being released now miss the mark, at least for now. So you can imagine a system like as in this diagram where different departments have different sets of skill instruction sets defined that ladder up to and are leveraged by Claude projects or Gemini gems, which have more client-specific context per client. So let's go more into specific use cases. So, many digital agencies are involved with with content production, but the amount of times I've seen people just load up their LLM sometimes without even with no proper training or configuration and just ask for a 500-word article on subtopic, it's insane. Your clients can already do this and are likely more advanced than that. So stop it, right? Build standardized skills and templates for your team. You should be creating content generation front end, sort of Claude artifacts, for example. If you've ever played with that, it looks sort of like a Google form that you can release to your team. One example here is like a SEO content outline brief generator, right? This kind of thing should be trained on your agency style, your considerations with each client specific nuance and context, brand guidelines, historical feedback, specific campaign details, the tone, the style. And another consideration is just that LLM memory is limited. So you need to keep these as proper instruction sets so you avoid hallucination and inconsistencies. This should sort of become a proprietary agency workflow, and you can name it sort of in front of your clients, like, our content blah workflow that you've named, so that you kind of build the sort of proprietary nature to it. And when we think about long form content production, if you're doing this at scale, take those learnings and create full on workflows. So we happen to use Make at Kahina, but there are many other platforms out there like N8N. And so historically, agencies were concerned about scope creep, right? When it comes to content production. Oh, we can only produce 3 blog posts a month or whatever it is. But in my opinion, nowadays, you can do the strategy, you can do the briefs, and you can produce the content if your client is willing for you to do that. It's not a question anymore of or, but I think it's and. And, these kind of workflows can be deeply integrated into your client teams on their side, their content, web, PR, GEO, et cetera. It makes you as an agency a lot more sticky with a sort of proprietary process that you've built that they rely on. So you can see here in this diagram on the right, it's just an example of an automated workflow. It's already outdated, but one that we used at Kahina, where we would, for one of our clients, just push one button basically after we've named a title or an idea, and we'd have a whole keyword research, competitive analysis, content brief, and then full article write, and then another LLM editing it, all the way into putting that into a draft in WordPress in our client site, which would then get human reviewed, and we get a ping in Slack and so on. So, you can imagine these workflows and how much more efficient you can become if they're trained properly, and this is all transparent to your clients, et cetera. Another important area for leveraging AI is data analysis and reporting, right? So there are 0 excuses in 2026 for not having a real-time dashboard of all of your KPIs. Like, there are great data aggregators out there like Supermetrics or Windsor AI, et cetera. So if you're trying to save money, maybe you could vibe code something with relevant APIs, but it's not always that easy. I don't recommend it. But regardless, your monthly reports should simply be this dashboard with all the inputs and an AI assisted summary on those results. Gone is the time where you needed to write all of your monthly summary reports. Like, you should do the analysis, but it should be AI assisted. If you have a template, this page is up X%, traffic from these sources are down. Like, that can be automated, and then spot checked for the last 5 to 10%. So the more organized you are with all of your data sources from multiple channels, SE rankings included, which I'll talk about in a moment, that are piping into this one ecosystem, Supermetrics to a Google Sheet to Looker Studio as an example, then the more then the easier things become, the more automated they become, and the more that you can focus on communicating that data as opposed to just producing the reports and analyzing them. And I actually want to give props to SE Ranking because they made it super easy to connect to Looker Studio. It was one of the considerations for Kahina when we moved over. As SEO agencies, you can build a sensible, relevant dashboard with rankings, Search Console data, GA, and other things in one view. And I think AI summaries leveraging MCP connections can make that even easier. So I think this is table stakes right now for any agency. Speaking of which, real data analysis, after you do marry all of that data up in AI, is a sort of huge unlock. We should be integrating every data source possible, whether you're an SEO or PPC, et cetera. It's relevant to you. So, you could do this with command line interface, and that would be very powerful. But honestly, it's not necessary. There are enough MCP connections out there which make the sort of UX UI of analyzing all of this in your favorite LLM possible. Whatever your marketing tech and data tech stack is, this is a force multiplier, right? You will gain data insights faster with more depth. And so for those of you who are less familiar, imagine a scenario where you can ask business and KPI questions, slicing and dicing with natural language and asking for insights, year over year on this device, filtering out for these queries. And how does that ladder up to the conversions that we saw from GA and so on and so forth? So, and then you can output that stuff to charts and decks and diagrams and so on and so forth. So this is just sort of, again, table stakes, and it's beyond just producing the report, but it's the sort of thought partnership with your digital AI colleague, your data analyst digital colleague, that I think unlocks those insights more than we can just do with our sort of human time. And one specific data integration I want to call out, and I don't think enough people do this, especially of the SEO agencies out there, is backing up to Google Cloud via bulk data export. It could not be easier. Don't be limited to 16 months of data and 1,000 rows, right? BigQuery exports, you get the complete unsampled raw data from Google's backend. So it's native. If you haven't done it, I do it today. The costs are negligible for a Google Cloud account with the amount of data, especially that you'd be using. And you have the ability to tell clients, like, we're backing up your complete GSC data, and we have it, and we're stored, and we go beyond 16 months. And that once you have that, you can start querying this data with easy conversational prompts in natural language. You don't need to know SQL to prompt about top performers and period over period anomalies. And when you're filtering, you're not going to get something sampled. You don't get the anonymous queries, but you do get the full data. So another use case here is technical SEO, or any technical monitoring for that matter. Everyone in digital agencies have been surprised by site changes that a client made without our buy-in or being aware. It sucks, right? So there are off-the-shelf solutions like Little Warden, which are really helpful, or you could probably vibe code your own. And what you should be doing either way is monitoring a sample of all of the pages that are important to you. If it's PPC landing pages, if it's on the e-commerce, your category and product pages, if it's, homepage and services pages and blog post types, you should be monitoring that and all other important technical SEO elements that you care about, robots.txt, XML sitemaps, et cetera. So I suggest building out a workflow that you can see here in the bottom right, which is it takes those automatic alerts and it categorizes them and it adds them to your project management system. In our case, it's Monday, and it allows your staff to follow up. And we also get alerted in an email and a dedicated Slack channel. But the point is, when your staff are the first to know about this and it gets added automatically to their workflow, you will surprise and delight your client that we were the first to know about it. Hey, we noticed somebody changed your robots.txt last night and it's blocking all search engines. Or we noticed that your XML sitemap went down. Why? Let's get that fixed. You in turn get to fix it first. but also be the first one to know. And so that builds trust and prevents any unnecessary drops or disruptions. And then here's something that I don't think enough agencies are doing either, which is building your own custom tools now. It is so easy now to do this with vibe coding, with the latest frontier models. So Gemini 3.1 Pro or Claude Opus, with 2 prompts, you can build simple tools and make your team more efficient. So it's kind of a silly example, but here's an example of a Chrome extension that one of our teammates built in like 20 minutes. And that was his first time. Now he's much faster. But what it does is it compares 2 SERPs based on keywords that we give it, and it calculates how similar the results are and the overlapping domains there, right in your browser. Now, there are other tools that maybe do things like this, but if you have a specific use case for a specific client or project and you find yourself doing something repetitive, be surprised that you can probably create a little built-in tool in Chrome or elsewhere that can do it much faster. Here's another example I did the other day, even just trying to prepare for this presentation as an example. I built it in 5 minutes. It's an AI overview checker, and you just give it a group of keywords, and you can export it to CSV, and it checks whether AI overviews are there, at least from my own browser, right? What you see in the upper right are the prompts that I created. Those are the only 2 things that I said to my LLM, to Gemini Pro, to create this plugin. So build your own tools and then consider branding them and actually publishing them. It's a pro tip. Don't sleep on that. This seems obvious now, but AI note takers are also a no-brainer and are table stakes for any modern agency, in my opinion. I know everybody's probably doing this, but platforms like Fireflies, Otter, Fathom, etc., or just leverage the built-in. I think Google Meet and Zoom does it now too. So anybody who's on a call with clients should have this enabled. And then those great AI summaries and transcripts should be automatically stored and integrated in your cloud, like Google Drive or whatever you're using. And in terms of automating all of this, we create filters, team-wide rules to ensure, you can see them in the upper right, that anybody who's talking to an external on an external call, it's automatically shared with the whole team. Anybody who's any internal calls, it's only shared with those participants, right? And so not only does it help with action items and summaries and all the traditional use cases, but it actually helps when you integrate all of those call transcripts and summaries back into your sort of AI ecosystem. It makes a huge difference to be able to say, hey, what was agreed on the last call? Or write a summary of, what are projects that were completed that we communicated on the last several calls, or help me create an agenda for our next call based on our last call summary, So these are just, automating this both in terms of storage and access to these call recordings and transcripts is another unlock. So, I could go on for days about various use cases. I think we're truly at the very beginning of AI and automation in information work, and more specifically in agencies. The bottom line is, I think every single one of these at agencies should be building an ecosystem where you have this omniscient AI colleague who knows everything about you, your agency, your clients, your meetings, the data, and all agency staff should be able to talk to, reason with, or thought partner with, ultimately delegate tasks to their own AI colleague all day, every day. And so don't settle for out-of-the-box LLM AI responses. Do it properly, and you'll be amazed at the sort of task and deliverable efficiencies and data insights that you gain. All right. So once we've gotten some of those foundational best practices in place, we should be afforded with a bit more time to be human. And no, I don't mean sitting on the beach with an umbrella drink while all your AI agents do all your work. Sorry. I mean leaning into human-led client services, right? Ultimately, we're all service providers. We're providing a service to another human at the end of the day. What makes them trust us? What makes them decide to re-choose us every month after month? So I'm going to dive into some examples of how, following AI and automation, agencies should really lean into being more personal and human to help sustain and grow the agency. So one of the largest game changes for us at Kahina over the last few years has been our head of client engagement and success, and his role in developing a back-channel communication cadence, periodic check-ins, basically, with our clients. and not just our primary contact, but multiple contacts in each client organization. So these check-ins should be ideally outside of your standing calls and be dedicated to non-day-to-day project and task-oriented conversations, right? It should ideally not be the primary point of contact on the agency side, but honestly, it can be. And the point is the focus of the call, and the focus of that check-in call is active listening with important zoomed out prompts. How's the business going? Like understanding a bit of the politics and what's influencing what's driving them right now. What can we be doing better? Feedback for our team. Like, where are we missing the mark? And doing this allows you to truly understand what's going on with the politics and organization and how our work fits in the larger picture. We built a dashboard based on these calls you can see in the upper right that is constantly updated with the risk of them potentially quitting, the dates of the last client engagement call. And it's not just calls. We also try to do more informal, quick Slack or email touch points like, hey, how's everything going? Since our last call, you mentioned A, B, and C that we could be doing better. I see the team's been doing that. Are you feeling that? Right. So this is intelligence and reconnaissance gold. I can say this process has massively helped us act on feedback before it becomes problematic. And it's helped us retain clients for significantly longer than the prior baseline, which was already pretty good. And I just think it's critical to do, and don't sleep on this. Another very human level focus should be sharing quick wins and insight nuggets, right? So if you should have the time to do this. If you are leveraging AI and automation, make sure you build in time to send something informal outside of your monthly reports or your weekly calls and agendas and so on and deliverables. So here is just like clients don't read reports or regular deliverables usually, but quick wins and quick nugget insights create trust and they get shared in the organization up to the boardroom sometimes, right? So here's an example of just like our staff. It happens to be in WhatsApp because we had that kind of cadence and connection. And then another one in Slack where it's just, again, quick wins or quick insights, something that we noticed. It doesn't always have to be a win. And the bottom line, it helps your contacts look good because they can share that internally, but also feel good. Well, they feel like we are on their account. We are daily thinking about them and looking at data and so on. It just reinforces their why about why they chose you as an agency. I would say one of my core beliefs around, staying human is this deep systemic integration. And honestly, since COVID, it's never been easier to be deeply integrated into your client's organization because a lot of companies have gone hybrid or remote. Or at least are more used to that. You're seeing you're just another face in the Zoom or the Google Meet or the Teams. Most organizations, they're integrated that way, right? And so we need to get integrated into their systems as much as possible, be it with Slack Connect, with Teams, their project management system over our own. If they're on Asana, so we get integrated into their Asana or their Jira or whatever it may be, you can truly integrate as an extension of their team. So the hard part of this job as digital agencies, it's not the hard skills or the deliverables, it's the soft skills and the emotional intelligence of being able to actually navigate this corporate maze. And so whether you're integrated on a personal or when you're integrated on a personal human level, you can understand the sort of organizational dynamics and politics to really get shit done and implement it better. And so we really believe in that sort of human first emotional intelligence and getting through all the political influence is going to help you get stuff done better. Another thing is alignment, right? So another way we really think about staying human is being aligned with the other humans that we are working with and the organization at large. So when you're integrated, all the more reason to be aware of and aligned on exactly what the priorities of your client's organization and company are. And you need to align them with what you think is important from your services perspective. So if both you as an agency and your clients are not reviewing project plans and timelines and business priorities and having QBRs on an ongoing basis, you are setting yourself up for failure. And that is ever more true in today's world. So I think so many agencies are focused solely on the sort of unidirectional work of delivery and not necessarily alignment. And when you're fully aligned with the people you work with client side, there's so much less room for missteps or misunderstandings. And we should be creating the space for these conversations because of the AI and automation that we are doing from a deliverable perspective and a data and reporting perspective. Speaking of data storytelling and expectation setting, I'm sure I don't have to tell everybody here that explaining the ever more complicated world of KPIs and attribution is becoming a huge challenge. But we need to dig deeper and spend more time dedicated on these topics with our clients. No one item in a meeting agenda is enough, but we have to have dedicated calls and time to navigate and explain and discuss these industry-wide challenges. It's not a one-off chat. It's an ongoing conversation, and it means doing things like, and you can see in the bottom right, which we do often, is a quick screencast in the middle of the week or after a call or whatever it is, just going through some data as it comes in and actively storytelling on an ongoing basis about what the data tells us and what the leading indicators are. Don't wait until the end of the month or the quarter, but on an ongoing way, show your clients that, like, hey, I happen to notice that conversions aren't aligning with the traffic increase we had. And here's, share your screen and go through it. Or, impressions are up, but clicks are down. And this, we think we know the answer to this, and here's why. If we start looking at these queries, we can see AI overviews are taking up lion's share, but we are getting mentioned, as you can see here. So preempt the story so that story can be told internally at the organization, or better yet, your branded quick screencast is forwarded around internally at the organization. So being integrated, aligned, and, sort of leveraging your soft skills with this topic is the differentiator, right? So humans tell stories, and we are responsible to connect the dots for our clients and tell those data stories in a future where the data is not so clear, it's not so self-evident. The next bit about staying human: personal relationships. It's not a bullshit agency tagline. It's a byproduct of staying human. So if you have the opportunity, get in person, especially with your larger accounts. Like it's a differentiator to be able to understand what's going on in an organization, and it builds trust for the whole year, even once a year, getting together. Understand all of your stakeholder context personally. There's this weird thing, especially different cultures, about getting to know people personally, but there is a way to do it professionally that gets you closer on an intimate level. It sounds funny, but it's true. And maintain that consistency of your agency point of contact as much as possible. Often, you might get a bigger account or different accounts, and you want to shuffle people. Try to keep people on your accounts as much as possible with the same client, and spend real-time listening and documenting things. That could be what they like, small gifts when you visit them. This picture is us visiting one of our large corporate accounts, and we knew that one of them liked a certain kind of whiskey, and we brought it as a gift, and he demanded that we take a shot right there. So that's a picture of that. And another image of one of our staff he's Irish, getting a message on St. Patrick's Day because our client knew that. So just demonstrating the personal connection between clients and how does this all come together? Well, if you're leaning into, in a world racing towards AI sameness, it's important to ask ourselves, why does your agency exist? Why does it deserve to exist? And I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating for mass-produced AI slop, but how do we become more efficient while staying bespoke, custom, and human, right? How does your agency become known for your personal integrity and the humans behind the consulting work? As you can see, our entire retention and business development strategy at Kahina, anyways, rests upon this principle that deep personal relationships outlast individual engagements. People stick with you through industry and organizational turbulence at their own company, and they'll also stick with you as they move on in their career to their next company. Most of our business development comes from people, our contacts, moving on and then bringing us aboard on their new company. And we oftentimes get to stay with the original company as well. So clients remember you as human consultants and as people, and deep personal relationships outlast individual engagements. last couple of slides here. Last, but definitely not least, if you truly are human first and human led, ultimately it's the people behind the work that you're offering as a service, people as a service. They may leverage technology, AI, automation, et cetera, but you are selling people's time, their hard work, their care, their connection. So brand accordingly, right? Showcase your people, the imperfect human parts of us. And you will see that on your social that your clients will comment and like and so on. And so clients don't connect with deliverables or technology, they connect with people. And that's it. Thank you guys so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ari. It's been extremely insightful. I've been very invested in the conversation that you had here. First things first, thank you so much for extending the thanks to your success team, because I do believe that the success team is something that any company needs to have, and not only because I'm on the success team there. Secondly, I feel really related to what you said there, that people might just still be put off by the idea of vibe coding and using ChatGPT and any LLMs to create very technical things by themselves. Most probably because they still believe that you need to be a tech savvy person in order to do that, and they just miss the fact that AI can actually help us learn how to use AI. So I think we have 2 questions from the audience, and if you still have a few minutes, we'd love to have those answered. Okay, so let me just put the first one right here on the screen. So do you see a trend of agencies charging a human-only premium for strategy and creative work, similar to how brands market organic food?
That's really funny. I have not, but that's really interesting. I do think that we will start to see, like I said, this sort of bifurcation is in terms of what can clients get for a given retainer of money between different agencies. And I think, I saw this during the early years of SEO with sort of like automated SEO crap reports and so on. The difference between something that's custom and really thought through versus what anyone will be able to do, which is like click a button and build a strategy with an LLM, or maybe even set a ton of recommendations, whether it's SEO or PPC, or automate a strategy. Like I think companies are going to be able to start to tell the difference there, and I believe the differentiator will be, the sort of human judgment, the years of experience, not pendulum shifting by any given new trend. And I think that LLMs and AI at the moment is a little bit sensitive to those kind of trends because it's trained on content that everybody writes about, all these new trends. But like humans tend to be a little bit more grounded in our judgment. And I think that's, I don't know about a premium, but I think why would they choose an agency over doing it in-house? I think it's for that agency judgment in the years of experience and how to leverage AI, not let it run you, basically.
That's a very interesting stance. Thank you. And one more question that we have from the audience is, how do you prevent automation from making the client experience feel robotic and detached, especially during the onboarding phase? It's something you already touched base with, but maybe you would like to elaborate a bit more here.
Yeah. I think I don't know if our clients are always aware of the automation that we are using. And I think it's really important that you spend that time before sending a client deliverable or a summary, making sure it feels like you and your voice, right? It should enhance you, not just be a copy paste. And that's really important. And if I wasn't as clear with that, it's really important. So I think it's getting us 90% of the way there and then enhancing it. The same way that if you were working with an intern or a really smart junior colleague, you would review that work before sending it to a client, right? Over time, you start to build trust and workflow and give feedback. Same idea here, right? So that is super important. I would also be avoiding sending massive long reports that look super automated. Sometimes less is more, right? And it's focused on their needs. When you send a massive report or a 30-page deliverable, nobody's reading that, right? So it's also about taking them through. I mentioned the screencasts and explaining things. That human summary taking through something either on a call or on a screencast and so on is important. It's critical. And having that voice, I think, and that face will allow someone to connect, I think, because we are all going to be living in a much more automated AI world. So I think that the human connection will be a differentiator. I hope. I'm kind of biased to hope for that, but that's my belief.
Yeah, let's hope for that. And one more small question. Which is your main LLM?
Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of funny. My kids say that my best friend is ChatGPT because every time there's a question at the dinner table, I'm pulling that up. So I have a ChatGPT Pro for my personal account, and it's just I need to come off of it because it knows so much about me. So it's kind of hard to move. That's on a personal level. At work, we have switched to a combination of Gemini and Claude. Gemini simply because from a security and data privacy perspective, we already are paying for it and it's built in and it doesn't train. And so I know I could upload comfortably client sensitive data, KPI, revenue metrics, and so on, and I'm not worried about it. The same can be true for Claude, but for the moment, given that we're on Google Drive and everything is just, the ecosystem is just so shared, we leverage Gemini at the company for sensitive and also just like based on everything you know about me, what should I do in X, Y, and Z scenario? But Claude is really powerful, especially Claude Cowork and Claude Code. Like it's doing amazing stuff for us, and so we're using that more for special projects or R&D or creating artifacts. But it's changing. It's like if you asked me 2 or 3 months ago, it's actually slightly different. So the idea is not to just stick with one thing, is to experiment, but also find something that you can rely on from a security perspective, but also a knowledge management perspective.
Great, great. Thank you so much for the insights. And again, Ari, thank you for the practical advice. We've heard a lot from you, and I hope our audience has jotted down some of those ideas. So again, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Okay, guys, so I think we can now move on to our next presenter. But while they're still in the wings preparing for their presentation, just a quick reminder of what Ari mentioned during his presentation. I personally work with a lot of agencies that rely on reporting, and we know that reporting is the king. So Google Looker Studio is one of the best free plugins that you can actually utilize to provide very insightful data combined with SEO ranking into a single report. So we've actually prepared a course for you for data for SEO reporting and data visualization that is specifically designed for agencies to learn more on how to actually utilize Google Looker Studio in combination with SEO ranking to get the most out of it. And our next segment is going to be a little different. So I'm going to invite Andrew Holland, who is actually Director of SEO at GBH. He's going to be talking about content and how to scale content output without hiring. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Thank you. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. So just a few quick words. GBH is one of the UK's leading digital agencies that is based in Manchester. Andrew is a leading strategist that combines SEO, GEO, CRO, and digital PR to drive growth on a global scale. Joining me today, I have my colleague, Natalia. She is SEO Ranking Spain Country Marketing Manager, and she'll be taking the interview over from me. Hello, Natalia.
Hi, thank you, Max, and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us for our agency day. Andrew, thank you for joining. I'm very excited for this conversation because now with all the changes, content strategy is changing so quickly because of AI. And I know that you have a strong point of view on what agencies should be doing differently now without having to expand their teams. So there is a lot of questions to cover. So let's just jump in. What do you think?
Yeah, let's just do this. Yeah, we've got plenty of time, so just dive in.
Perfect. So let's start with the first questions. one point. What major shift in search should agencies accept in the AI era? And what content habits should they abandon right away?
Okay, it's a great question. It's a big question. First off, okay, so first of all, SEO agencies are in a bit of a bind, and the bind is that when SEO first started years and years ago, it was a bit like a library with very few books on there. So you imagine the library opens in town, there isn't many books out there, and what happens is people walk into the library. And when they walk into the library, there's a few books on every subject. And if you want to know about a certain subject, you consume the book and then you get a favorite author and so forth. That's how the internet was in the early days. It was like huge demands for information. And people and agencies and individuals and softwares grew because they were serving a hungry informational need out there. And they translated that into fame for themselves, brand growth, and so on. And we saw that with the HubSpots and the Ahrefs and the SEMrushes and all these different big agencies that did content models out there. But then what ended up happening, like anything, we saturate things. And in the end, there becomes too much content out there. And everyone's kind of like, well, what is content for? Why do we do it? Well, let's just do content. And then we had this model called topical authority came about. In the end, what we've had then is people pumping out tons of content. Now people pumping out content with AI, people doing all kind of crazy stuff. And they never stop to think about, why are we doing this? What's the reason behind it? And is it a successful model? So a lot of SEOs and SEO agencies and growth hackers as well believe their sole purpose is to exist to grow traffic. And any traffic is good traffic because it lands somebody on your website. And that was the model. But what happens is when you turn a measure, so traffic was a great measure at one point, when you turn it into a target, it ceases to become a good measure, which is something called Goodhart's law. And that's what ends up happening. We all turned traffic into a target. So we went after it and everyone just threw as much content as you could until the whole of the internet was saturated full of millions of articles, which just basically were the same thing repeated constantly. And then AI swoops in and AI takes over. And then now AI answers that information. So regardless of your views of what content was or does for brands, the fact is the traffic's disappearing and the traffic from that content is disappearing. So the first things agencies need to accept is this idea of writing content to generate traffic from Google organic search is done and dusted, and you need to abandon that. Now, the problem we have is this is a very hard thing for some people to abandon, especially if that's what you believe SEO is. You believe SEO is just generating traffic. Well, when traffic's been taken away, what do you replace it with? And unfortunately, a lot of SEO gurus and a lot of leaders in the industry, leaders in speech marks, have said, we're going to create something called AI visibility. And when you look at AI visibility, it's being measured by the amount of citations your informational content gets from pseudo prompts injected into AI systems by tools. And so you end up with this now new measure. But the problem is if we were treating content as advertising, getting people onto a website to expose them to your brand, if that citation, all it does is answer a query informationally, unless it places your business in that answer, and I'm not just talking about a little panel, it is very, very little value to that at all. And that's the model that everybody has got to abandon. They have to abandon the idea that you're going to create content for a metric called AI visibility, which is citation counts. That era is gone and shifted entirely. And it's going to upset a lot of SEOs. It's going to upset a lot of SEO leaders. It's going to upset a lot of people. But we're now in the world of real marketing. And we're in the world of actually using content to drive business relevant results. And this idea of citations for information is not valid unless that information influences the purchase of your brand's products or goods or services.
Thank you. So let's move forward with another question, which is, when reviewing an existing content library, how do you quickly identify AI-generated sameness, duplication, or pages that are not worth updating?
Well, I think I have a kind of different view on this because, look, I think there's a cutoff now. Okay, great. You had loads of content. You did hire an SEO agency, or you as a business churned out loads of content and you did successfully and you got organic traffic. Well, that organic traffic is now declining rapidly and it will continue to decline. Anything that informational out there will continue to decline. So now you've got to look at things about revenue. And you don't think about content pieces themselves. You go into your search console, your SE ranking tool, and you go in and you start analyzing, okay, what is driving business for us? And that's the goal, because at the end of the day, we have to be paid to drive meaningful business results. And that is the thing. You go in and you look from a commercial lens, is what is working for us on a business level? What can we protect? What are we potentially going to lose? And that's where you start the process. So you have to be thinking commercially. And unless you think commercially as a search marketer, which is what we all are, you know, people call yourselves SEO, GEO, PRs and things like that. We are search marketers. And unfortunately, the issue we have is the industry believes it's largely a publisher. And we've gone in this publisher's mentality. And for the most part, none of us are publishers. There aren't that many publishers out there. And if you are, that's a whole different world. So if you're serving businesses and the idea of goal is to extract as much revenue as you potentially can from the market of search, you have to think commercially. So when I go into any kind of business and look at things, I'm like looking at the money. Where's the money coming from? What is this page asset for? What is it for? What's the commerciality? And that's actually really easy to do. And I'll give you a dead simple answer. You can dump a website, all your URLs into a website and get a spreadsheet if you want, shove it into ChatGPT and start prodding the data. Saying, you know, what are the commercial assets? Look at your GA4, look at where the conversions are happening and things like that. Now that's a longer subject, but realistically, it's like we need to have a complete shift of mindset in terms of, okay, what is this for? That's what we should be asking ourselves. What is the purpose of the output we're doing? And when you do that, that will change everything. It will turn your whole view upside down. And you can walk into a boardroom and start talking in terms that the CFO loves to hear. That, you know, you start talking about commerciality.
And this makes a lot of sense. And how do you evaluate whether content should be refreshed, merged, or rebuilt, or removed? Or you are basing on what you've just said, basically on some commercial metrics?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a look at what's happening. So I'll give you an exact example from in the trenches. So we've got a client whose sales team has produced an article to help sell more stuff, but it is cannibalizing one of their main product pages. So it's almost like cannibalizing a page and pulling it down. So now we're looking at to move that and merge that content into one page, or move it further apart to distance the pages between each other semantically. I hate that word, but that's what people love. So you know, you have to start all the way down at the commerciality and look at what your money pages are, and you need to defend those, and then you need to look at what's happening. It's very easy. Cannibalization is a much bigger problem now than it ever has been, and largely because Google's leveraging natural language processing, and your goal really as a search marketer now is to protect the money assets. Our job is to generate as much income as we can from organic search for a business, and use marketing principles to do that. So that's how I look at that. I look at what are our core assets, what are our money pages, and what's going on with them. And I religiously focus on what's happening with money pages.
Money, it's such an important point to mention here. So let's move forward to our next question. For example, if an agency wants to run a content refresh sprint without adding more people, what would the 30, 60, 90-day plan look like?
Okay, so you've got to decide on what you're doing this for. First thing, you know, why are we refreshing all this content? To try and keep traffic? Or are we a little bit like the boy in the dam story here, just putting our fingers into things? Or are we trying to find work to be busy? And that's the goal, really. Okay, and you need to connect this content refresh sprint with an actual marketing process. So first of all, we already know Google Organic Traffic is going. So why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because, one, these were great assets. These were great assets because they were liked. These are great assets because they get linked to. Okay, fantastic. Then we decide on which are the priority assets. And that's what you do in the first 30 days. You know, you're mapping out what these priority assets are. You're looking at what's important, what worked and what didn't work. And generally speaking, if you go and do this, you'll find a lot of content that gets read by very few people. And you can make personal decisions, and you can sort of speak to your sales team and look at what they need from the content plan as well. And then you've got to start building a different kind of plan now. You've got to build a content promotion plan. So once you identify all the assets, you then need to think about, well, how are we going to promote these now that Google is no longer giving us any love? And that promotion strategy can be physical. It can be in terms of you're going to email people, you're going to send people. Okay, well, is the sales team need involving in that? Are they going to do the outreach for us? And that's important, by the way, because, you know, your sales team can distribute your content for you, and they can use your content, and you can give them tons of content to help them to sell for you. You might not have a sales team, though, of course, but when you're looking at these content refreshes, you're doing so from an economic lens, but you have to find a way to distribute them. And just pressing publish is no longer a distribution strategy in the eyes of Google. And you might get some traffic, you might get a bit of a refresh, but it's probably not going to last very long. So you need to start thinking, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to send them out via email to our newsletter? When are we going to do it? What order are we going to do that in? And also, are we going to invest in social media budgets to promote these, to boost these? Are we going to email people like we did in the old days and say, look, we've created something really good? Now, that needs to be considered very early on in this plan, because there is an economic cost, either what they call an opportunity cost. That's the cost of the time internally that you would spend on this versus what you would do something else with. Or is there a financial cost in terms of you have to get an influencer involved, you have to go and email people? You know, if you've got a really great piece of content, you might need to grease the wheels of an influencer to get it spread out live through their view. Or can you sponsor some newsletters? So there's lots of ways to think about it. And then finally, you know, once you've decided the what you're going to do, then you've decided the how you're going to distribute it, then the hard work comes in refreshing the assets. Now, I say that's the hard work because now that's becoming the increasingly easy part. The increasingly easy part is to shove a document in Lovable or on any other one of the million AI platforms are out there and make a really great piece of content, go and gather data, unique views, whatever it is you're going to do with this data. You can make it a lot better, a lot faster than we ever had. You can analyze data at scale. You can make imagery now that you couldn't do before. You can create video assets using Notebook LLM. I did it the other day for an article of mine. So once you do that, then you make decisions about, you know, you can make these assets really cool. But there's no point in doing the reverse way, is having a look at what you want to do and then making it all snazzy and jazzy and amazing, and then having no plan to go and do things. So you've got to start about the why we're doing this, what are we doing, how are we going to do it, how are we going to distribute it. And then the last bit really is the bit that AI saves all the hassle. And you can use AI to create amazing content, just that you're not going to get any love from Google with it anymore. So, you know, and don't expect any love from Google. Don't think they're going to come up and save the day. You know, they're not. They don't care about anybody. They care about themselves and their own revenue chain and their shareholders. And they're moving increasingly to be an AI product anyway. So you have to start thinking about distribution and planning that in. The days of let's just do a rewrite of our content so we get traffic from Google is gone. Even if you spent 90 days rewriting tons of content, it still isn't going to give you much return. It's probably going to have decreasing return. Even if it gives you a little bit of, you know, traffic back temporarily, it's probably not going to give much for long. So you have to think differently. We're entering into the era of PR, content marketing. Those things are more important than ever if you want to get your content distributed.
Thank you. And what are the most effective content surgery edits that improve clarity, depth, and usefulness on the content?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways you can look at this. So now, I mean, the fact is, if you're not using AI to do content and edit content, then you're probably very much behind the curve, because the whole thing is designed to edit. And now Canvas is the best tool, be that in any AI platform, ChatGPT or Gemini. Canvas is incredible. Now, it means that what you do, it's an interesting word, content surgery, because I like that word. I've not heard that word before. And it is a good analogy that you are a content physician. So the idea of you as a writer, as an SEO anymore, on the content you're working from, is largely to make it as informationally fit as possible. And fitness is an interesting term, because we borrow that from behavioral science and economics, and what it basically means is, how can you help this content outperform other similar types of content out there in the market? And you need to look at that from that point of view. Now, information efficiency and fluency is currently the best ways to do that. You know, where are we saying things inefficiently? Now, you can use AI to do that. So information fitness is something from a study, or well, it's a peer-reviewed article and study called Information Foraging Theory, and that's a study of how humans navigate the web to find resources and our cognitive resources around that, and how we use them. And we forage a little bit like animals, really. We're looking for information scent. We scan headers, we look at the text, and we've all been there. You click an article and it's got masses of text, and you think, no, I can't bother to read that. You scan it maybe, and you go on the back button. So now the job is to make your content as efficient as humanly possible, and you want to use machines to help you do that. Where are we waffling? And then, in addition to that, you want to make your content as easy for large language models to extract. And there are various sentence structures which can help that, and paragraph structures can help that. But essentially, it's just really good writing. And depending if you're talking about content as in article content, or whether you're talking about landing page content for your money pages, your products and services pages, when it comes to the landing pages, you have to look at the fitness signals of your business. It's that, we go from being informationally fit from an article perspective to being informationally fit from a services perspective or product perspective. And what you're looking for there is, again, it's all about fitness signals. It's all about looking at the key performance attributes that allow a business to outperform others, their positioning of a page's products or services, and being good at that. Now, I'll be honest with you, this isn't rocket science. This is just very good copywriting. And that's the challenge here, to be a good copywriter in this era of AI. And that's a skill set that the SEO industry threw under the bus for profit. Look at the writers out there. There's so many have been made redundant over the last 12 months to 2 years. And actual fact is, good writers are the ones that you need to come in to be able to force AI to write better. The good writers need their judgments and their skill and their years of understanding content to come in and help businesses to sort their AI mess out that's probably been happening, and also to improve content that was outsourced on the cheap, or improve the landing pages which were outsourced on the cheap. So realistically, we're returning to the era of good writing, but good writers can scale their judgment efficiently, because they're going from a doing to a thinking, and their knowledge is what you need to be able to apply to AI.
And following the AI topic, so how should pages be structured so AI systems can easily extract and summarize key information and still remain persuasive for human readers? So what's the AI to human ideal work ratio here?
Okay, so essentially, I mean, what we're talking about is again, it goes back to this: what are we creating content for? And you mentioned the word persuasive for human readers. What are we trying to persuade them to do? So, and that's largely where you should always start. You should look at the goal. What is the goal of this content? and your content should have a goal, and that goal should be easily defendable to any CFO. So if you got an email today from the CFO and he said, what is this article for that you've just spent hours on or days on or X amount of money on? And you should be able to say, oh yeah, we created this because of X, Y, Z. So we created this because, for example, you could write a buyer's guide and you talk about your products in there. We created this because other people are talking about our products and services and it's not quite in the way that we want it to be. That is being dragged into AI. So we've created this piece of content to try and influence what AI is saying about our products or services. So we have some skin in the game. And that's a perfectly defendable point of view, and that's something you can do. So how do you do this, and how do you structure it so AI systems can observe it? Well, depends again if it's information about just a subject or topic or your products or services. It does depend, and it depends if it's a money page or not, because that also is depending. But essentially, you're getting into the world of GEO, generative engine optimization, and generative engines work on points of difference. And that's the key, and it works on positioning. So I'm going to talk about money pages more than informational content for a second. So what we see in the wild of AI is that when a prompt is highly constrained, so it has lots of things in it that you're requesting, you know, I'm a 47-year-old man, I'm looking for a pair of running shoes for my first marathon, I suffer with flat feet, what are the best shoes? You're giving a lot of constraints, you're forcing the AI to go out and do a lot of work, and you'll generally get back quite good results for that by putting a tiny bit more effort in your prompt, or just pressing the speech button and speaking it. You will get very good, very well positioned results. Now, what happens then is if you reduce or remove the actual constraints, and each one you go back and back, and the end of the day, you just with marathon running shoes or running shoes, then the large language models default back generally to the most famous brands. These are the most contextually relevant referenced brands related to that subject. You know, marathon shoes, you're going to get Nike and so on, and these kind of things. Whereas you as a business, you then need to talk about what your positioning is. You know, what business you're in, what products are you creating, who do they serve, and make it really defined. Now, the more defined you make it, the more likely you are going to get really high quality traffic from large language models. Now, there isn't any great secret in this: subject, verb, order, SVO, semantic triples. Yeah, they're all relevant, but it's just good writing. And you could just be a good copywriter, hire a good copywriter, and they will get your page optimized for AI without knowing anything about AI, because they will be looking at the key differences between your product, the key selling points of your product. And that goes all the way back to the days of Eugene Schwartz and copywriting in that era, and the Mad Men copywriting era. So in essence, you need a great copywriter to come in and create great copy, and you need that to come in and base it around the things that make you different. And ideally, it's who this product or service is for, what problem does it solve them, and how do you solve it better than the others out there, and also where's the proof that you've solved this. And generally speaking, in that really basic fundamentals is what's going to help you to get extracted and summarized by AI, because AI is looking for points of difference. The problem comes is as you go less constrained, and I should say you go shorten the prompt, so it's just like best running shoes, the models will default to the most distributed, the most famous out there, and it doesn't really matter what copy you put on your page, it defaults to a fame model. And it already has a lot of that in its training data anyway, so you can't really get that. So the model of the thumb is, guys, hire great writers. That's what that great writers are the people that can save the internet from itself, so to speak, and save businesses and brands. They are the superheroes now, but they just haven't been positioned that way for a very long time.
And could AI become a great copywriter?
I don't think it needs to be. I mean, it already is. AI will do whatever you want it to do. I'm optimizing pages with Gemini and ChatGPT, and I have done for years. In fact, I ranked my first AI piece of content in 2021. And, and it generated thousands upon thousands of visitors, like 1.16 thousand visitors a month from a piece of content that I wrote using Jasper or Jarvis, as it was called years ago. And so it's not about whether or not AI can be a good writer. AI doesn't know if it's being a good writer. You know, you as a human have to judge the taste of something. And, you know, you can create 100 articles and, you know, unless a human can come in and look at them, then it's kind of pointless to create 100 articles because you haven't got that human in the loop. So which is a bottleneck, by the way, of AI. You can use AI to create 50,000 pages and generate some success. But if you're not able to read them yourself to judge whether or not they're quality and representing you in the right way, you haven't got a clue of what's being said about you online, because literally you're just outsourcing everything to a machine that may be saying incorrect things about you and incorrect things about your industry. And I know lots of people are doing that because it'll lead to short-term gains. But what you've got to do is the humans are the ones that judge whether the AI content is good. And it might be great first time around. It might be amazing. But unless a human judges it and reads it and agrees with it, then it's just, we're just creating things to be absorbed by machines and we're not even in the flow. And that becomes a dangerous process where we're not actually looking at the supply of information out there and somebody isn't checking it. So that's the bottleneck. We have a human bottleneck. It won't stop others from spamming the internet completely and throwing rubbish out there at a massive scale. But that's a decision whether you want to be part of the slop or whether you want to be part of the solution. And some people who are money hungry and want short-term money will choose to be part of the slop. They always will be. And other people who think and care deeply about the brands they work for and the clients they work with will want to be part of the solution. And one goes without any brakes on and one has to have brakes, and that human is the breaking point, because we can only as humans hold so much information cognitively. You can only check so many web pages with attention because there's a reading time, and the reading time is now probably going to be the new output in terms of, you know, yes, we aren't necessarily creating all this content by hand, but we are reading it and checking it, and that filter is key.
Thank you. And finally, the last question would be, what does good change control look like for agencies where they are making high impact page updates?
I think change control, that's a strange subject. I'm not really sure what that means, but what I would say is that I think when you're making high impact page updates, there's a lot to think about. And I've learned a lot of lessons from doing this over the years. So essentially, natural language processing is really about scaffolding. You can have a section of a web page that you get rid of and it was holding up something else on the page that was driving keyword success. You can't quite see that yet. I'm sure somebody will create a tool that allows you to visualize how each section interacts with each other, but we don't know. So what I generally look like is I say to people, it's great to have if you're working on a very high quality money page, it's great to have an idea of what the final page would look like. But if it's generating revenue now, be very careful and go slowly. You might have the final page what you want, but you might want to add an element and see how that reacts and do things slowly. So implementation can be slow on high value assets. You can have what you would want it to look like, but that implementing that might cause issues. So, and I always recommend, if that's the case, when you've got a high value asset, then you go slowly. When your asset is not high value, you can go as fast as you want.
Okay, thank you. We're running out of time, and now let's go to our Q&A session and check the questions here. First, as mentioned, we should think commercially. How does that play into content pruning?
Well, if a page doesn't do anything for you from a links perspective or a revenue perspective, or you're not using it to advertise your business, or the sales team aren't using it, then what is it there for? You know, it's just gathering dust. You know, there's very little reason for some content to exist and get rid. It's no point. I mean, it's just dead weight. But again, you know, it doesn't really make much difference these days. If you just want to leave it to gather dust, it's just there. It's not hurting necessarily. So I focus on the revenue and work backwards from there.
Thank you. And the last one is, How do you programmatically ensure AI is producing new insights rather than just synthesizing and and using what already is in the top 10 results?
Okay, so why would you need to programmatically do it anyway, if I'm honest with you? Because that's like, again, okay, what's this content for? Who's reading it? Why are we creating things programmatically? There's this obsession in the market to create programmatic web pages at scale. Why? Why do you need to do that? There's some great analogies here. So if I get a team of 10 people to go out there and interview the world's leading experts on email marketing, for example, and we produce a fantastic ebook on email marketing advice from the world's leading experts who are generating money, you know, I don't need to programmatically do that. I can create this fantastic asset, and then I can use advertising revenue or advertising options to push this out to people. You know, that's the future, where we move from a content was done to leverage Google traffic to get people on your website to a content is done to advertise your business. So, and you need one asset is greater than 1,000 programmatically pieces of junk. And I don't think you need to use AI to create new insights or anything like that. I don't think it needs to be programmatic. I think what you need to do is focus on delivering great content for the audience you seek to serve and figuring out ways to get it in their hands. And that might look like one asset every 6 months. It might look like one asset a month for 12 months. It doesn't need to be programmatically. So I think we have to go from back to a marketing view and look at marketing full stop. And like, there's a lot of issues the SEO industry needs to deal with, and mainly, what do we do and what are we for? That needs to be isolated and understood.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for all these insights. It was a very practical session, I would say, and I think now many of us have a much clearer idea on how to approach content refreshes in a smarter way. And now I'd love to hand it over to my colleague Maxim, who will take us into the next part of the event. And thanks again for such a pleasant session.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Natalie. It was beautiful. We learned a lot, and especially thank you so much for coining the term content surgery. It's something new. It does have that ring to it. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to to have this session with us, and have a good rest of the week, you too. Thank you.
Yep, pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Amazing. So we are coming closer and closer to the end of the session, but we still have plenty of content to discuss, and a few other presenters who have very valuable information, who have their own stances on how to handle AI, how to work with it in a human-like way. Now, before we jump into our next presenter, just a quick filler word about competitive research. Now, some of you, especially those who have been with SEO Ranking for some time already, know what competitive research is about. It's basically one of the core functionalities of SEO Ranking, a module that provides you with an amazing overview of the organic and paid traffic, and as of recently, a great visibility into an account's AI branding and what LLMs actually relate to that website. But our newest addition to this module is actually the sources page. Now, the sources is our way of helping you synthesize the top ranking web pages that AI actually uses in creating and generating its replies. So in other words, in this specific section, you can go ahead and see which pages are used as citations for creating specific replies to specific prompts. How to use that? Well, this is the big question. Our main use case here is that it's a great source of backlinks. It's an amazing way to research more content and see how you can actually improve it for your clients. And as always, the best way to try something out that is new is by trialing it. So feel free to use the QR code you can see right here in the screen. You can join our community with a 14-day free trial where you can access competitive research with its sources, as well as multiple other tools to see how they work out for you. And don't forget that by subscribing with your corporate email address, you will actually get more benefits than with a generic one. Again, we are working with agencies very intensely, so we appreciate if you as an agency choose us. So if you do, you will see increased limits and additional features that otherwise are not available for generic email addresses. Okay, that said, I see that our next presenter is actually ready behind the wings. So please welcome Miruna Dragomir, who's VP of Marketing at Planable. She'll be talking to us about the new healthy margins and what you can make out of them in 2026. Hello, Miruna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I've been sitting quiet and nicely here behind the scenes and listening to the content. So
You had the best spot. You were right there listening to the session. So before you jump in, just a few quick words about you. Miruna is a marketing lead at Planable, a company that we've recently joined with here at SEO Ranking. She specializes in personality-driven B2B strategies, and she uses that to simplify content collaboration and drive growth. Miruna, thanks so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
yeah, thanks so much for introducing me, Maxime. Today I'll be talking about the agency margins and how we can make them better in 2026. We'll be diving into actions and actual tactics. Let me make this full screen. So we'll go into actual tactics as well, but we'll also speak a lot about benchmarks. So every agency owner can kind of place themselves and try to understand how they can do better and in what bucket they are placed. So this is all based actually on a report that just came out literally today. So you'll be able to grab it, and after this session, you'll be able to dive even deeper into it and go as nerdy or as loosely as you want into the actual data. The survey had 186 agencies respond to it, and this is filtered agencies. So we had, I think, closer to 300 responses, but 186 were the replies that we felt are relevant, qualified, and from real existing experienced agencies. This has the agencies themselves were from all sorts of environments, both SEO, social, and multi-service, and we split them into 3 profit tiers. These tiers we'll continue speaking about them throughout this whole presentation, and you'll find them in the report as well. Of course, there's the losing agencies that are still losing money. There's the 0 to 40%, which are kind of mid-tier, and there's the 41 plus margins, which are what we will call high profit agencies. And of course, they're all over the world, 5+ regions: USA, Europe, Canada, Australia, and others as well. So I feel like the data is pretty covers pretty well all sorts of use cases, enough not to be skewed by certain unique use cases. Now, in order, let's talk about the big picture, how the market is split. It's really interesting to not see that traditional bell curve that we usually see on these sort of graphs. Like you see pretty much everyone piling up in the mid-average tier, and the extremes are usually very low populated. This is kind of different. It's opposite, one might say. We see a lot of agencies in that initial stage of either losing money or very low margins, and a significant chunk of almost 20% sitting at super high profit, super high margins, 80% plus, which is quite impressive. So this is kind of how we see the split. So keep this in mind when we will say high profit and low profit. And this is the split. Now, in terms of client and how that number of clients and how that correlates with margins, it is super interesting to see that 5 clients does seem to be the turning point. This seems like a milestone where after which, an agency kind of settles, stabilizes, and manages to go into more, into higher margins and into that sort of scalable engine sort of economics. So in the one client and 2 clients as well, under 5, we see a lot of losing agencies, right? 53% of losing agencies only have 1 client, and 33% of them have between 2 and 5. However, the winning agencies, the high margin ones, are well above even 5 clients, but most of them above 11 clients. So that tells us something. It does tell us that in those early days, maybe, first of all, keep the hope alive and the faith alive. The fact that you are losing money seems pretty standard at this stage. And rather than focusing or thinking too much about that, I think the efforts should go into business development and growing that portfolio. And yeah, it does speak a lot about what's normal at each stage and what we should focus on at each stage. In terms of employees, this was pretty interesting, and we'll keep going back and forth between this slide and the next one. 6 to 15 employees is an interesting bucket. If we look at the split alone, one might say it's not that big of a deal. Only 11% of losing agencies are here, and 6%, almost 6% of the high profit ones are here as well. So what's the problem? The problem is that when we look at the actual data, we see that no configuration at this size actually hits more than 33% of margins. So that is kind of low, and it does seem to be like a particularly squeeze zone. So if you're here, the data suggests that you should try to get out of it, either by trying to optimize your costs, because at this point you're probably covering your costs, but you're not really managing to build real margins. So you're not failing, of course, but you're not really winning either. So this is a point where you'd want to start thinking about optimizations and grow the clients, but keep the employees maybe a bit back. It's one of those humps in the growth stages of an agency. So yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind. In terms of the company size and how it scales, and how it correlates with the margins in the rest of the buckets, I think it's interesting that the relationship is not that linear, not as linear as we'd expect. It's natural for us to think, the bigger the better, we just hire more, and probably those big agencies must be printing money. There is definitely a winning scenario, but after a certain point, it seems like margins are a bit harder to keep up. And up till then, you don't see that. You simply don't see that linear growth. You see this area that's kind of tough here. You see the solo founders, yes, mostly associated with losing money, but also you've got almost 10% of high margins in this area. So it's not necessarily, the correlation is simply not as strong as we might intuitively think. And yes, 31 to 50 employees seems like the sweet spot. 50% of all high margins areas sit here, and only 5% of the ones that are losing money. So this should probably become a bit of a goalpost. It's a beautiful sweet spot in the stage of any agency. So getting here, of course, that takes a lot of work, but once you do, it seems things seem to be a lot smoother to sail. The peak configuration, as we've said, it is 31 to 50 employees, but when we correlate that with the amount of clients, we see that 20 plus clients with 31 to 50 employees is the gem. This is where we see 83% of high profit agencies sit and 0% of the losing money. It is by far the strongest configuration in the data set. No other combination comes even close to this. Now, we're going to move into less the benchmarks and more the actual actions that these agencies are taking to increase their margins and to optimize their configuration. So we have these 4 buckets: AI optimization, labor optimization, raising prices, and cutting non-labor costs. And what we see is that AI optimization is popular with both. It would be weird if it wasn't, right? So both losing agencies and high profited ones are very focused on this tactics. Almost 50% of almost 50% of both buckets are employing this tactic. Labor optimization is more popular in the high profit margins. Considering how we saw a stronger correlation in the amount of clients with the profit. So this might make sense that maybe labor optimization, when you have just a few clients, is not the first thing that you start with. But then raising prices doesn't seem like it should either, because that is what 42% of the losing agencies tend to focus on. So it definitely does not correlate with high margins. Only 20% of those choose this as the lever to increase their margins. As for cutting non-labor costs, that seems to be a bit more balanced amongst the 2 buckets, right? 35%, 30%, almost 30%. So none of them seems to necessarily cut in front. Price increases does seem like a reactive signal. It's not really the strategy to win long term, and it's a lot more often used by, again, losing agencies. When, again, we look at the combination and try to find the best one, we found that AI optimization plus labor optimization is, again, the winning tactic. So 42% of the high profit agencies employ these 2 tactics together without the price increase as the primary lever. And this seems to be like the only zero loss combination. It makes sense. It's not just about the labor. It's not just about the employees. It's also about the workflows, right? So AI optimization, we should really start thinking about it as more than just replacing the actual work, but it's also helping. It can help a lot with the workflows and how the process runs smoothly. And it's not one or the other. It is clearly them working together is the best way to go. And again, price increases alone is used, like the percentage. We've seen here that 21% actually of high profit agencies raise the prices. And yes, it's pretty low to be used as the only lever. The losing money agencies seem to be, yes, again, a lot more popular. So it's not the best tactic to employ, and it doesn't signal strength, I guess. However, again, correlating it with the amount of clients, I do understand how that may feel as the only lever at the beginning, like maybe labor optimization, AI optimization. If you have just 1-2 clients, it feels like it wouldn't move the needle, and it probably wouldn't. So this is not necessarily a matter of causation, I think. It's not that, if you increase your prices, by default, you're going to get the result of losing margins. It's more that I think it signals more that it may feel like the only lever you have at the beginning. And maybe you should be more tolerant with the margins at the beginning, and maybe you should focus more on getting to that scale in terms of clients rather than squeezing as much as you can from the existing portfolio. And I would like to say something else here. In the full report, you'll find the average contract value based on service provided as well. And there is a correlation between losing agencies and the prices. So they do tend to get less, the contract values do seem to be lower than high profit agencies, which do tend to price higher. So it doesn't mean that, you may be pricing too little, but it may be the cost of the early days, as I said. So just maybe it's okay to sustain that for a while until, again, you get the scale and foundation and the portfolio that you need to kind of make decisions like this, increase the prices. Maybe you can afford at some point losing some of the customers in that stage. So yeah, again, it's a matter of stage and focus. Now, looking at the operating systems and kind of putting these two mirrored one near the other, the low profit agency bucket and the high profit agency bucket, it's interesting to see. We've already talked about this, so I'm not going to focus on it any longer. But one interesting tidbit is that 20% of the low profit agencies actually call themselves AI first, which is a lot higher, one might say, than the high profit agencies. Only 13% of these actually call themselves AI first or position as that. But in terms of actual AI usage, we're seeing the high profit agencies beat by a milestone, right? So they are close to 40%, while the low profit agencies are sitting at just 25%. So this is a very interesting combination. It's really less about positioning. Maybe I'm sure some audiences react better to AI first positioning, others less. I don't think that's necessarily the issue. It's more about the actual usage that influences the margins. So one of those walk the talk kind of scenarios. In terms of client acquisition, this one actually makes sense. Paid ads and cold outreach is very much the way to go for low profit agencies, and referrals and inbound SEO more so on the high profit side. The paid ads versus referrals, I think that one makes sense. It's for sure not a causation thing. It's more that low profit agencies, again, tend to have less clients. So referrals is really, there's only so much a few clients can refer. But the inbound SEO, I think, is more interesting. And obviously, I'm kind of preaching to the priest here, but it does tend to be a tactic that even SEO agencies tend to push or delay. It takes a bit of time. It doesn't bring immediate results, but it seems like you're going to thank yourself further down the line when you do get to that high scale stage. In terms of time drains, low profit agencies lose most of their time in client approval. And that does not happen and is not reflected in the high profit agencies who lose that to scope creep. So I think this is quite interesting. It does, and I don't think this one correlates necessarily with the size. I think client approval is a matter of onboarding many times, right? And I think it's something that's super important to figure out in the early days and to make sure you sustain in the further down the line, just because the way you onboard your client is going to dictate the relationship throughout, and it can be a huge drain in your labor costs, essentially, and it's going to affect your margins. So it's definitely something to look into, especially seeing how 40% of agencies are losing time to this. Scope creep can probably also be looked into and see, maybe the client process there can be optimized to eliminate some of the lack of clarity in the briefs and the handover and the actual delivery. And finally, yes, it does seem like the tactics employed and the pricing models and all of that, it seems like low profit agencies are rather reactive, while high profit agencies tend to build longer term strategies. In terms of pricing models, this was super interesting. By service, we're going to take a look. For social, and it does differentiate. So this is super clearly for the social media services, custom pricing per client is very much correlated with high profits. 45% of high profit agencies choose this model, and it does seem to be the winning one. As for productized packages, that works best for SEO. Again, 50% of high profit agencies choose this, and it is the best model. Now, in the mid tier, we see more the performance-based for social. So this is U-shaped, meaning 40% of unprofitable agencies choose this, but also almost 30% of the high profit one. So this probably is one of those case-by-case scenarios. Of course, it depends on the client industry, I guess. So like one thing is performance-based for e-commerce. A whole another thing is performance-based for, I don't know, long-term B2B models. So it's probably a matter of, again, customizing it for each client and making sure that it fits. And it's going to bring you the results that you hope for. For SEO, the monthly retainer seems to be the one that varies, but it does seem to peak in low profit agencies with 73% of them choosing it. As for the hourly rate, this one is the clearest one for SEO. For the SEO service, 6%, only 6% of high profit agencies choose this. It is pretty clearly not the winning one. And I would argue that with AI usage, even less so. Volume is losing its spark on all fronts. So hourly, it's not gonna bring you results in the long run. If you offer both of these services, it is a question of how you should bundle them and how you should sell them, and it does tend to correlate quite interestingly with the amount of profit. So separate retainers seem to be the zero loss structure. What this means is that there are simply two separate retainers. However, one bundled retainer, it seems to be moderate risk. Only 9% of the unprofitable ones choose this, but the high profit ones don't. So it's somewhere in the middle. Rarely sell together. 30% of the unprofitable ones choose this and none of the high profits. So this is kind of like a bit more concerning. You should probably not choose this one, kind of pick and choosing and picking each client for a different service probably doesn't really speak to a very holistic approach. And so as an agency, you want to be more and more intertwined with the business goals, and that usually means multi-channel. The upsell model, meaning you start with one and further down the line, you upsell the other, again, is not correlated with high profit agencies. So it is in the avoid bucket. In the bigger report, you'll also find how this correlates with the overlap of these two services, like whether they are treated separately or not. And generally, I think this will change throughout the year because we're seeing channels be a lot more intertwined. We've been speaking about this, and I'm sure it's on everyone's minds. With AI visibility, isolated channel by channel approach no longer works. So selling them together and working on them together will probably increase in popularity and be seen a lot more frequently in high profit agencies. But even now, you can see that treating them separately or gradually does not work. Right. So if we were to conclude this into a step-by-step playbook, we would say that the the first step is to count your clients. Well, I guess you know the amount of clients that you have, but for sure, if you have below 5 clients, again, that's a big risk factor. Ideally, focus on getting more, and rather avoid the impulse of increasing your prices right now. It is a reactive signal, and it may hinder the relationships that you have, or it may discourage the few referrals that you have access to. And check if you're in that 16 to 15 employee squeeze zone. Of course, you know the amount of employees that you have, but correlate that with the margins and see if there's anything you can do to focus on that labor optimization, AI optimization, winning configuration. As for the delivery and pricing rules, you should definitely tighten that. That should be step number 2. Switch to this optimization on labor and AI in parallel as your primary levers. Look at how you price your services, whether separate or together, and kind of analyze whether that's the best way to do it, and maybe instead of increasing your prices, restructuring it, which can feel totally different to the clients. And finally, that whole saved time, it's a good moment to reinvest it in high value work, either in expanding your portfolio or embedding AI in your daily workflows, not just the positioning of your agency, because that may not necessarily bring more customers. And yes, set the goalpost, the milestone to the 31 to 50 employees and 20 plus clients configuration. That stood out so much that it might just be the place of bliss. Right. This was kind of the broad strokes of this report. Again, there's so much more to dive into in the actual report. It's free. You can access it. I think we're going to share the link in the chat as well. But I'm here for all the questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the data and for your findings. Yeah, these numbers are definitely something our agencies need to consider, especially since AI is taking up some space in those margins. And about that, we do have a question which relatively which has relatively been covered by your presentation here. How has the rising cost of enterprise AI subscriptions impacted the traditional 20 to 30% net profit margin benchmark for agencies? But maybe you would like to, give just a few pointers to, refresh what the presentation was about, so that we can answer this question quickly.
Yeah, of course. So we surveyed basically agencies and tried to understand what are just kind of like, let's say the report is split into, part of it is what are the benchmarks, because we love to compare ourselves to others. So I feel like any agency owner out there just wants to know, am I doing well? Is this good? Is this bad? How are others doing? Should I aim for more profit, or is this normal? And the second part of it is, okay, now that I know, how can I do better? What do those super high margin agencies do to get to that point? Now, about this question, I think it is interesting. I wonder if it comes from this point of eating into your agency costs generally. And if it is, I would assume that it also helps a lot with the labor costs. So in theory, AI subscriptions should really help make space for more clients. So as long as that's the effect, those few tens or hundreds of dollars per month should probably be still a lot cheaper than new employees or contractors. So I'd assume it's not the biggest problem, but open to being contradicted.
Okay, that's a very good point. And on the same topic of costs, what is the one hidden operational cost, if any, that high margin agencies have successfully eliminated this year? Do you think your findings can help us answer that question?
Yeah, I think we've actually done this report last year as well. So it was interesting to compare. The less surprising or maybe even disappointing fact is that the operations continue to eat into those margins. And it's something that I don't know if it's a matter of prioritization or if it's, you know, how it's supposed to be. Probably isn't, and there's always space to improve. But I do feel like the awareness is increasing in not just focusing, because with AI, I feel like a lot of us are jumping on, let's create more, let's do more. We can just 10x our production of articles, of posts, of content, of anything really, and just, you know, maybe charge the clients more or whatever. And that's part of the scheme for sure. But the overlooked and boring side of things does not stand in the creation. It stands in the collaboration and workflows, which are so no one wants to get into it, right? Like we can talk, whatever. We Slack each other, we WhatsApp each other. The client can call me. I don't care. But that's like all those micro moments in which you go back and forth with your peers, with your designers, with your whomever, with your clients. Those eat into time a lot more than we think they do. So I think, you know, I don't know if that's what agencies have successfully eliminated this year, but I do think they should. So I think, you know, time tracking and trying to understand those inefficiencies in communication and collaboration is definitely where you should start, because the other side is a lot more obvious. Again, the production, the creation, everyone's doing it. So that's not going to bring you the competitive advantage that you probably think it does.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that advice. We do have another practical question here. And if I just may, so we have a client, we have a viewer who's saying that they own an agency and have an amazing team that does wonders, but the clients are too low paying. So what I think here, what we're looking for is a bit of an advice. How do you think our viewers should tackle that?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question, because I tried to stress, because some of the facts in the report can maybe be blaming the idea of raising your prices like it's a bad tactic. Don't do it. I don't think that's necessarily the issue. And I don't think, again, it's a matter of correlation versus causation. And the fact that agencies starting out with less clients tend to charge less and to increase the prices is probably normal. You shouldn't stay away from it. If you know the market price, and if you know you're below, and if you feel like you've proven your value to the client, I think raising the prices is absolutely reasonable, especially after 4 years. Even, you know, the market itself has went up, not only your experience and your built knowledge in this time. So I think that's definitely reasonable. You should do this. Just do it thoughtfully. Give themselves enough time to prepare. Don't try to do it, you know, starting with the next invoice, you're going to see this spike. Make them part of it. Maybe, you know, this is what we're pricing clients now. You've been with us for so long. We appreciate that. We don't want to take you to this whole new price all of a sudden, but let's meet in the middle. So try to have a bit of a reasonable partnership approach to it. And I think that should, if the client is good, they should totally get that as well.
Yeah, those are very good pointers. Okay, thank you so much, Miruna. Very good insights, very good data. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Yes, we're getting closer to the end of our event, but we have a very special guest prepared that will come onto stage in just a couple of minutes. While I still have you here, I would like to quickly go back to that Planable topic. Since Miruna is VP of Planable, I think it's important to mention that Planable is one of our big products right now. And by joining SEO Ranking, you'll be able to test out Planable and see how it works for you. Because with Planable, it's something different. Unlike regular scheduling tools, it doesn't only provide you with a calendar, it actually helps you work new tools into the current workflow that you have. It builds a workflow and a system around you and your teammates where you can collaborate, send and request approvals, and basically do all of the regular things that you normally do through your spreadsheets. And I know that there are those of you here who are still working with the spreadsheets, so you can definitely replace those. Now, moving forward, while I still have you here for a moment, there's also something that it's important to mention. SEO Ranking has been a vocal supporter of Ukraine and the Ukrainian efforts, and of course, Ukrainian charities. And since it's coming into its fifth year, you can see here in the slide a couple of charities that you can actually partake in. Now, please, we encourage you to take some time to donate to the charities and support Ukrainian charities as well. Don't doubt the amount or the effort that you put into it, because be it big or small, it actually makes a huge difference. Okay, thank you. And now moving forward to our last presenter for today, last but definitely not least, we have James Brockbank, Managing Director at Digital Loft. He'll be talking to us about turning visibility into revenue when clicks are less predictable. Hello, James.
Hey, how are we doing?
Great. Thank you so much for waiting there in the wings. I know we had
You're very
a little
welcome.
extension, but thank you so much.
You're
Okay,
very welcome.
before
How are you?
I pass on the mic to you, just wanted to say for those of us who are in the audience, with over 15 years of experience helping ambitious brands leverage SEO and digital PR, James definitely knows more than a finger or two on how to do a great business impact. So James, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so firstly, hello everybody. Yeah, thank you for sticking around. Today I want to talk, as introduced, about commercial first SEO and digital PR. It's a topic that's not talked about anywhere nearly often enough, but I think anyone working in the agency space right now needs to hear this, needs to relate to it. I'm not here today to tell you how to do SEO, but what I want to do is hopefully change how you think about SEO, how you sell it, and how you measure success. But first, very, very quickly, quick intro. Hi, I'm James. I'm Managing Director and founder of an agency called Digital Loft. I've been working in SEO for 16 years now, growing an agency for 12. And I'm currently on a mission to get more SEOs to think in revenue, not just rankings. But as an intro to kick things off, where I want to start is with a couple of sort of fundamentals, a couple of home truths about the state of SEO in 2026. These are things that over the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to be coming back to a lot. These are things that are really important, and they're fundamentals that we should all be applying in our work as SEOs, in our work with our clients. And the first of these is that SEO success means making more money. In my opinion, the only measure of SEO success is increasing revenue. Anything else is either progress. I'm going to talk about this in a minute quite a bit. It's either noise, or it's vanity metrics, or it's, in the case of certain hype around AI, complete and utter bullshit. The only measure of SEO success is increased revenue. More traffic does not, at least not necessarily, mean more revenue. Just because traffic has increased, it gives us no indication as to how a business is doing. There's so many instances where traffic goes up, but revenue doesn't. Similarly, there's so many instances where traffic goes down and revenue stays flat or even increases. But SEOs have become so accustomed, especially agency SEOs, with selling traffic growth and measuring success as more traffic. This has to change. Similarly, higher rankings does not equal more revenue. Unless those rankings are terms that are being searched by people who want to buy, who want to inquire, they're not going to, at least in the first instance, translate into more revenue. And the same scenario, more links does not mean more revenue. You'll hopefully see a trend there that the 3 or 4 things I've talked about already they're things that SEOs for too long have counted as measures of success. They've celebrated with clients. And in all honesty, a lot of the time, clients are sat there thinking, why hasn't my revenue increased? Yet you're celebrating rankings, you're celebrating traffic, you're celebrating more links. The reality is that if SEO isn't making more money, it won't be long before somebody, usually at board level, a senior stakeholder, says, why are we spending on this? Agency spend especially is under more scrutiny than ever before. And we have to start to put ourselves in the position of not just our agency contacts, but also senior stakeholders within businesses and say, okay, what's expected of agencies in 2026 has shifted. It's shifted significantly. We look at the digital PR front 2 or 3 years ago, most of the briefs we received were we want more links certainly from digital PR. Now it's we want to use digital PR to make more money from search. We have to get used to having conversations around making more money. But what we have to accept is that we've been through a strange few years. I believe there's been more changes in search in the last 12 months, last 24 months than there has been in the last 12 years. And whilst there's a lot of uncertainty still, there's also a number of things that we have to accept as a new normal. Things like the fact that organic traffic is largely down. Organic click-through rates are down and zero-click searches are up. These are things that as SEOs, as agency folk, they're out of our control. But we have to be paying attention to them. We have to be understanding the challenges that we face as an industry, talking with our clients about them, talking with stakeholders about them. But we also have to accept that this is the new normal. The things that we've had in the past aren't coming back. But what this means is that everybody is in panic mode. At least it certainly feels like that sometimes, certainly client side. At least this is the case for people who don't really understand what's going on in SEO right now. And when everyone's in panic mode, this often means a lot of flawed assumptions, often from senior stakeholders. A couple of examples that I've heard and seen in recent months are comments like, we need to recover the traffic we've lost ASAP. Let's stop investing in SEO and spend more on PPC. Is SEO even worth it anymore? Let's focus on LLM visibility instead. Or the big one of SEO is dead. Now, it's easy to brush these things off and dismiss them as I said, flawed assumptions, especially when we're in an agency world. But we have to put ourselves in the shoes of clients and especially the senior stakeholders and say, what is going on? Where are these flawed assumptions coming from? And the challenge that we face is that many influential publications that the C-suite, that senior stakeholders pay attention to, are making big, bold, inaccurate, misleading claims like SEO is dead, according to Google. SEO's dead, say hello to GEO. AI threatens search. The reality is that these are inaccurate representations of what's going on right now. But the people who pay our bills as agencies that keep us engaged they're reading this, they're consuming this. So I think sometimes we have to put ourselves in their shoes and think, is it a surprise that they're sometimes scratching their heads going, what is going on? What should we be doing? Do we focus on AI visibility? Does SEO still even matter? And I think despite a lot of this, the one thing that we can do and control as agency folk is care more about how much money we make for our clients. This should be obvious. This should have always been the case, but it hasn't been. And we've been through these eras of focusing on the wrong success metrics for SEO. But I believe this starts, and how we change this, how we start to think differently, is by breaking up SEO progress and SEO success. As I've already said, I strongly believe that the only measure of SEO success is revenue. And with that, transactions, SQLs, if there's a sales team involved. Anything that comes before that are traction and traffic metrics, their progress. At the agency here, we measure progress and success in a series of traction metrics, traffic metrics, and transaction metrics. Helps us to break it up and talk about it and set expectations. Traction metrics being things like keyword rankings, impressions, earned links. We expect them to then turn into traffic, share of search, with the end goal, that measure of success being revenue, transactions, SQLs. We have to separate these out. We can celebrate progress. We can talk about progress. We should be reporting on progress, but it's not the same as success. Success comes when we make a business impact, which is revenue. But why we've got here and why we have to have these conversations is that for too long, nobody asked if rankings and traffic are up, why isn't revenue? I think for too long, in-house teams were almost blindsided by traffic growth, rankings, and too many agencies hid behind the fact that if we show a chart going up to the right or grouped rankings that have increased, the client will be happy. Well, times have changed. But in the 16 years that I've been working in SEO, I believe we've seen sort of 3 eras of SEO success. Pre-2018, we were very much in what I call the rankings era. The rankings era, if I think back to when I started in SEO in 2009, every client had a list of 10 to 20 keywords. They were what we call money terms, and they were the keywords that everybody cared about. They were buying intent keywords, and all anybody cared about, the agency, the client, was where does the client rank for these terms? It worked because there were very few SERP features. Ads were mostly down the sidebar. Top 3, top 5 rankings would equate to more traffic, which in turn would mean more revenue, more sales. Somewhere around 2018, we moved into the traffic era. Now, this era is probably the biggest frustration of my SEO career to date, in that the whole industry feels like it pivoted to celebrating traffic in isolation of anything else. It's when we saw the surge in content sites, in affiliate sites. And the end of this was Google's helpful content update, at least the first major update in September 2023, which is when we finally, thankfully, entered the revenue era that we are now in. The revenue era is where we always should have been. But ultimately, it's where businesses have finally started paying attention to what matters, and that is revenue. Not rankings, not traffic, they're measures of progress. What really matters is revenue. So I want to talk then a little bit about how we do this, how we think about this, how we position SEO around making more money. And when we talk about it, it sounds quite simple. To make more money with SEO, you need to drive more traffic that wants to buy what you sell. And somewhere along the way, too many SEOs forgot that. We forgot that to increase revenue, the traffic we drive has to want to buy. And I'm going to address the sort of elephant in the room around what people are calling search everywhere optimization. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very much on board with the fact that search is fragmenting, that people are searching maybe different places to where they used to. People search for certain things on YouTube, they search on TikTok, they're using ChatGPT. But the reality is that what often doesn't come with the advice of you need to be everywhere is that most brands don't have the time in terms of they need results now or the money to be everywhere. And this can often be distracting. It can often feel like certainly clients, businesses have to be doing a little bit of everything when really they should probably go all in on where they can make the most money first and branch out from there. To revisit my point then, that to make more money, you need to drive more traffic that actually wants to buy from you. I talk about this in sort of the context of a keyword universe. If you think about that black sphere as what we typically think of as a keyword universe in SEO, and the orange circle as the searches you need to be found in, the searches that are going to make you money. The black, the wider, the bigger pool is the searches that you don't necessarily need to be found in terms of they're the searches that, yeah, they might be relevant. They might be real top of the funnel, but they're probably not going to make you money. We need to focus, at least in the first instance, on increasing visibility in where the search is where you need to be found to see a real business impact. And to make this really, really clear, to give 2 examples, somebody searching for gym clothing, let's assume we're working with a gym clothing retailer. A search for gym clothing is someone who's searching because they want to buy. Someone searching TikTok for leg workouts, on the other hand, they're searches that want free information. We need to make this clear distinguishing. We need to split these up, and we need to very much be talking about them in terms of, does the traffic that these searches drive and where they can drive it from, does the traffic want to buy? Or are we building top of the funnel visibility? Again, I'm not saying businesses shouldn't be building top of the funnel visibility, they need to. But we need to be thinking, where do we spend a client's budget or advise a client spend their budget most wisely? And I think my honest take here is that SEO is most effective as a way to capture existing demand. There's people searching every single day for the products and services that brands sell. And if a brand we're working with, a client we're working with isn't visible, then their competitors are. There is money on the table here that we need to take. So why are we getting so distracted with trying to show up on TikTok for informational searches that want free information when we're not showing on the searches that are being made by people who want to buy? To give another example of this, when we look at informational content, when we try and rank for informational terms, and a good example of this that I refer to time and time again is the search of how to tie a tie. Somebody searching how to tie a tie wants to know exactly that. They want to know how to tie a tie. I don't agree that they want to consume a long form blog post of editorial content that writes out how to tie a tie. They want what we see at the top of the SERPs, the image pack, a step-by-step visual on how to do it. When we try and rely on SEO to fill the top of the funnel, we're just hoping that the traffic that lands becomes aware of the brand and that eventually one day they might buy. Compare that to a search for men's waistcoats that lands on the collection page of a men's formal wear retailer. This is a chance to drive traffic that's searching because they want to buy either now or in the near future. It's night and day, but we need to make this clarity and focus on earning visibility in the right places. And just to touch very briefly on my comment about increasing brand awareness, again, it's part of the marketing mix. It has to be done. But if a brand wants to increase brand awareness, generate demand, there are far more effective ways to do that than ranking for top of the funnel terms. Paid social, YouTube, TV, out of home. What we classify typically as advertising is going to do a far, far better job of filling the top of the funnel than a blog post on how to tie a tie. I guess really what I'm saying here is that if you've not captured existing demand, make this your priority and talk with clients, position strategies around doing exactly that, capturing demand before you try and generate existing demand from SEO. We look at this in sort of a three-phased approach. And in the simplest terms, this is how to do SEO, at least to influence revenue. And it starts by identifying the buying searches that a brand needs to be found in. Where can we get traffic from that wants to buy? Analyzing why other brands, competitors are winning and what's holding you back, and then turning this into a delivery roadmap, an implementation and execution phase of do what it takes to win. I stand by the fact that any SEO opportunity, any SEO issue falls into technical SEO, content and on-page or authority, links, mentions, increased brand searches. Ultimately, we can put any SEO challenge approach to increase visibility into one of these. Whilst the way we do that has changed, those three fundamentals and core sort of foundations of SEO have not changed in the 16 years I've been doing it. Things like engagement, user engagement signals, they fall, in my opinion, very much into that content and on page. Yes, what Google rewards has changed, what search engines reward has changed, but those three fundamentals haven't shifted too much. So let's have a look at the types of searches brands need to be visible in if they want to make money. I call these buying searches. We can pretty much group these into product or service discovery, solution discovery, product or brand lookup, product or service evaluation, brand decisions. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but ultimately it's getting in the buyer mindset and thinking, how do people search when they're getting closer to buying? And then we need to be visible there. Once we know that, and I guess in a simple sense, it's commercially driven keyword research. It's when we're putting together a strategy, not blurring that with informational searches, with informational search volumes. because they often paint the wrong picture and they set an expectation that there's a lot more commercial traffic available and therefore revenue than there is. But once we know those searches, those buying searches that a brand should be visible in, we can start to forecast, well, how much revenue is actually available. We can plug in things like AOV, conversion rate, and we can start to model what's the ceiling here and how does it break down across different categories? Where's it going to come from? Strategically thinking, what collections, what categories, what keyword groupings do we need to increase visibility of to make the client more money? Then we can focus our efforts on that rather than going too thin. We then have to consider, where can we show up when these searches happen? Search isn't just 10 blue links anymore. We have merchant listings, we have AI overviews, especially when we get to buying searches like best. We have product roundups for publishers ranking, often quite prominently, which we should be using digital PR to get featured in. And of course, we have AI platforms like ChatGPT. We shouldn't just be focusing our efforts on how do we rank on the 10 blue links. We should be looking at SERPs individually and saying, how can we earn visibility in these and what does that look like? And then we reverse engineer what's already visible and use this insight to forecast effort into. We can use experience to analyze the pages that rank, the sites that rank, and start to determine what do we need to do to increase visibility. When this comes to costing as an agency, when this comes to resource planning, we should be able to at least loosely answer the question on what do we need to do to increase visibility here, to outrank who's already performing. And what do we need to do, and how long is it going to take, and what's it going to cost to do that? We can then start to build this into forecasts, costings, and showcase what it's actually going to take to drive this growth. Again, pulling everything back to that. If we want to drive more revenue, here's what we need to do that. This is what it's going to cost. But I think at an even simpler level, we should be asking which pages make you money. In almost all cases, 90%, maybe bar the homepage, which is often branded searches, most money is made from collection or service pages, product pages, or sales enablement pages. That could be brand comparisons. That could be ranking for discount codes related to a brand. Ultimately, we need to increase the visibility of these pages. And that's how we should be thinking in terms of how we drive this revenue that clients want to see. And a really powerful question to ask that not enough people ask is, would you run ads to this page? We look at PPC, we look at performance marketing, and the question that is often asked is, if we run ads to this page, is this traffic going to convert? Why do SEOs not think like that? We absolutely should be. It's such a powerful question to get in the frame of mind of, if we drive traffic to this page, is it actually going to convert into sales or inquiries? And I guess off the back of that is my personal frustration that our industry, the SEO industry, is not very good at distinguishing between strategy and tactics. But I think we need to go on further. We need to bring goals into the mix as well. And the way I talk about this is, at the top, we have goals. Goals are the why, they're the commercial objectives. As an example, we'll unlock an additional £100,000 in monthly revenue from organic search. That's why we're doing it. That's the output, the outcome we expect to see. The strategy is then the what. It's the strategic opportunity or approach. An example, we'll achieve this by increasing the brand's visibility across high intent buying searches that represent X pound in potential revenue opportunity. Increasing visibility across these searches will generate X additional monthly visits from users looking to buy, which at your current conversion rate in AOV equates to approximately £100,000 in incremental monthly revenue. That is a strategy. A strategy is not a list of tactics in a roadmap. They sit below that. That is, as I say, that's a roadmap. A roadmap, a tactical roadmap and a strategy are two very, very different things. Tactics are the how. They're the actions to be taken. This sits right at the bottom. As an example, to achieve this, we will do X, Y, and Z. All have their place. All are equally as important. But when we sort of lay it out visually, we can see that tactics sit under a search strategy sits under goals. Everything rolls up to that goal of making more money. And we do this by, in my opinion, tying tactics to buying searches in commercial pages. And if you go and make one change in your agency today after this talk, I want you to start getting your teams. I want you as agency practitioners to start thinking when rolling out tactics, when recommending tactics, how does this ladder up to increasing revenue? A really easy way to do this is to sort of note this down as what are we going to do? That's the tactic. Which pages are we trying to increase the visibility of? Then it's a check of, are these commercial pages? Would increasing the traffic to these result in more sales? And then which buying searches are we trying to increase the visibility of? We don't want to see informational terms there. We want to see buying searches, tying specific tactics to buying searches. Searches tied to pages that if we drive more traffic, the chance of that turning into sales is high because the intent, the search is being made by somebody who wants to buy. To close on myself then, it's not enough for us just to run SEO around revenue. We have to get better at having better commercial conversations. And I want to leave you with a series of thoughts, a series of areas to go and explore more into, and a series of commercial mindset shifts that agencies need to make. The first of these is you need to think like a performance marketer. Become familiar with terms like average order value, lifetime value, and customer acquisition cost. Any SEO, I believe, would gain so much from spending a bit of time running PPC. When you're directly tying spend to outcomes, to return on ad spend, it changes your whole mindset, and you start thinking about, well, which search terms should we pause? Which pages should we not run ads to because we don't see the return we need? It's definitely food for thought on how as SEOs we behave more like performance marketers. The truth is that SEO compounds and acquiring customers becomes more cost effective over time. This is one of the huge selling points of SEO. It's one of the few channels where this is possible. Most channels do not compound and reduce customer acquisition cost over time in the way SEO can. Think about that and have those conversations. Please spend time understanding margins. Products and services cost money. We have to be thinking about what's left after that. If we drive £10,000 in revenue to a client, that is not £10,000 to the brand. They have to cover the cost of the product or the service out of that. They may be left with £3,000, £4,000 if they're lucky from that £10,000. Out of that, agency fees have to come. And only then is it making a contribution to the business's bottom line. We have to understand margins to communicate, is it worth the business investing in SEO? Combined with things like lifetime value, we can extrapolate that over time and have much, much better conversations. Know which products or services make a business most money and what a business wants to sell more of. I can't stress this enough. When we're led solely by things like search volume, we can focus on the wrong areas. We have to have commercial conversations and ask a client, ask a business, what do you want to sell more of? If we tripled, quadrupled the demand to a certain collection, can you handle that? Sometimes they can't, but they may say we could on another service. Have those broader conversations. Use forecasts as a tool to show when a business will see an ROI, not just how much it could be. I think we're all guilty sometimes of showing what that ROI could be, what that revenue return could be, but we don't answer the question of when will we see that. CFOs, CMOs, CEOs right now, they want to know exactly when that return will start to come in. Make it really, really clear and communicate that. And lastly, reporting should answer the question of, is SEO making the business more money? If it's not, before long, somebody will ask the question of, is this actually worth us doing? Okay, cool. That's me. Hopefully some useful takeaways. Hopefully I've changed your mindset on how to think a little bit more commercially about SEO and why we need to be going beyond rankings, traffic, and thinking the only real measure of success here is revenue.
Thank you so much, James. That was a
Very
very interesting way of thinking of the eras, because as you were talking about like the eras that we went through, like from rankings to traffic to revenue, it just it reminded me of people calling like the nowadays era the AI era. And the implication there is that SEO is dead, AI works in mysterious ways, there's nothing we can do, let's abandon ship. But the answer here is actually the revenue, because there are a lot of things that we need to drive it.
It's focus on what's going to make you money. And I think, it's really easy to get distracted right now with AI. And, I'm absolutely not saying AI search isn't coming. It is. But I think ultimately what we have to remember on any marketing channel is we have to make more money. And if we're not doing that, then questions will be asked quite quickly, quicker than ever before.
Yes, absolutely. I think we have a question. Let me just.
Of course.
Okay, so this is an interesting, it's more of a statement, but let's see what we can make out of it.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, there it is. So, hi, James. I spoke with a lot of agencies that do large scale SEO, but most didn't answer the question. So the question is, when the brand is a boutique one, especially in the travel and hospitality domain, they don't want to use keywords like best hotels in XYZ, their main page, or have traditional SEO landing pages.
Agreed. I agree completely. And I think that's very representative of the space we're in right now. As someone who does a lot of work in the travel and hospitality space, those search terms, best hotel in XYZ, they are dominated by marketplaces, booking.com, etc., the OTAs. And the chance of a boutique hotel ranking for those nowadays is next to none. Because if you think about the intent behind a search for best hotel in a location, people want choice. They want to understand their options. Marketplaces, OTAs, they serve that. Instead, I think, the advice often when looking at certainly boutique hotels in this sector, and again, I think a great example of why it's so important to look at the SERPs and look at what's ranking is to go, okay, what makes that hotel different? What can they appear in? Things like pet-friendly boutique hotels, understanding where they can and can't compete. And again, I think, sometimes knowing and acknowledging that SEO isn't always the best channel. I know it's hard for some people to hear, but I think, I've certainly made the recommendation to boutique hotels in the past that you can't compete. You would be better off spending that budget being more visible on booking.com and the marketplaces, because you can't compete. And I think sometimes it's that honesty with brands to steer them in the right direction. That may turn into other opportunities to run their PR, if you're a full service agency, to run their PPC. But I think sometimes a little bit of honesty goes a long way, and being realistic with what the SERPs show right now.
Right. A little bit of honesty can make a huge difference. That's true. Let me just quickly check the chat once more. Maybe we have another question. Okay, so we're out of questions, but we have some amazing statements there. That means that people are listening and they really appreciate your presentation here, James. So again, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. It was a pleasure having you, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we can now move forward and come as close as possible to the end. I really appreciate all of you sticking with us. I know it's been a long 3 hours. I've been all 3 hours here with you. So before we wrap things up, just a quick reminder that the best thing you can actually learn about what SEO ranking offers and how you can implement those practical bits of advice that you've heard from our amazing presenters today is by trialing the features and by joining our community. Feel free to use the QR code that you see in the slide right here. If you haven't joined our community just yet, give it a try. See how the features work for you. See how the metrics are actually talking to you. And you can actually learn a lot from the metrics, but also from us. We're very open to communicating with you, to giving you our SEO advice. We have an amazing blog that you can visit at all times, where our SEO specialists who are deeply involved with the creation of SEO ranking features are constantly publishing new articles cutting edge pieces of advice. So feel free to do that. And yes, I think it's time to wrap things up. And to do so, I need to extend a massive thank you to our panelists. We had Morty, Mike, Ari, Andrew, Natalie, Miruna, and of course, James. I'm extremely grateful to them for sharing their expertise and their advice. And of course, to all of you for sticking around with me all this time. Even those who left the sessions a bit earlier, still thank you for joining. We appreciated your visit. Now, we started today by acknowledging the fact that AI has rewritten the playbooks that we are all so reliant on. And I think the big question nowadays is not so much about which new tools are going to provide us with better insights, but rather how do we evolve into understanding how to use those tools? Because apparently the conversations that we had today, the presentations, they showed a lot of insight into the fact that not only we need to create new tools, but also understand how we can change our strategies. And although we will be using a lot of automated technology, a lot of AI, we'll still need to remain human-centric and client-centric. So don't forget to follow us. We have LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We constantly post amazing pieces of advice, insights into AI, insights into ever-changing SEO, and just join our community and be part of it. Again, thank you so much for being part of this event. It's been grand, it's been brilliant, and I was your host, Maxim, and I'm extremely grateful to all of you. Have a good rest of the week, and cheers.